Whatever happened to the forgotten side dishes and homemade snacks from the 1970s that you want back? Somewhere between the avocado green refrigerator and the harvest gold countertop, a whole world of food quietly slipped off the American table. You and I are going to walk back through 100 of them. Some you will remember in an instant, a few you may have made just last week, and a handful you have not thought about in 40 years until right now. Number 100, 7-layer salad. This is the salad you built in a straight-sided glass bowl, so everyone could see the stripes. Down at the bottom went torn iceberg lettuce, then a layer of frozen peas, then diced celery and green onion, a blanket of shredded cheddar, a scatter of crumbled bacon, and over the top a thick seal of mayonnaise, mixed with a little sugar. You spread that dressing clear to the edges like frosting, covered it, and let it sit in the refrigerator overnight so the flavors settled in. The genius was that the dressing sat on top and never touched the lettuce until you dug down and tossed it at the table. That kept the greens crisp for a full day, which is exactly what a working mother needed for a Saturday gathering. She wanted to prep on Friday night. It showed up at every bridge club, every graduation, every backyard reunion where somebody owned a nice trifle bowl. The peas thawed into little pops of sweetness against the salt of the bacon, and the sugar in the dressing made grown adults go back for thirds. You do not see it much anymore, crowded out by spring mix and bottled vinaigrette that never tasted like anything. But once you rebuild those layers with your own hands, the memory comes right back. The very first time you tossed it down through all those layers, the whole bowl turned into a confetti of green and pink and gold. That looked as good on the plate as it tasted. Did your family have that one aunt who guarded her exact layering order, like a state secret? Number 99, Watergate salad. Number 99 is the pale green cloud that was somehow called a salad. You emptied a box of pistachio instant pudding mix into a bowl, folded in a can of crushed pineapple with its juice, a tub of Cool Whip, a handful of mini marshmallows, and chopped pecans or walnuts. No cooking, no oven. You stirred it together, chilled it for an hour, and set it out next to the ham like it belonged there with the vegetables. The name landed in the 1970s. Right when the word Watergate was on every front page and every evening broadcast, and the joke stuck to the recipe forever. Cool Whip had arrived in American freezers in the 1960s, and pistachio pudding gave the whole thing that startling mint color no real food ever had. Children loved it because it tasted like dessert and came dressed up as a side. The pineapple kept it from being cloying, and the nuts gave it just enough chew to feel like you were eating something. Some cooks pushed it further and layered it into a cake instead. It went soft and weepy if it sat out too long in a warm room, so the smart cook kept it cold until the last minute. Today, a bowl of bright green fluff looks almost cartoonish, next to a plate of roasted vegetables. And that is exactly why people miss it. It was fun, it was easy. It made a hot day feel like a party. When was the last time a salad made you smile before you even tasted it? Number 98, funeral potatoes. Here at number 98 is the casserole with the somber name and the joyful flavor. You started with shredded or diced potatoes, stirred in a can of cream of chicken soup, a carton of sour cream, a pile of grated cheddar and melted butter, then spread it in a big pan and topped it with crushed cornflakes tossed in more butter. It baked until the edges bubbled and the top turned gold and crackly. The name came from the church kitchens of Latter-day Saint communities in the Mountain West, where the women of the Relief Society made pan after pan to feed grieving families after a funeral. Food was how they said, "We are with you." And this dish traveled well, reheated without complaint, and fed a crowd for pennies a serving. But it never stayed at funerals. It showed up at Sunday potlucks, holiday tables, and ward parties, anywhere a lot of people needed to be fed and comforted at once. The inside stayed creamy and rich, while the cornflake top gave you that buttery crunch in every bite. The knock against it was always the same. It was heavy, and it leaned on canned soup, which the fresh food crowd later turned their noses up at. But nobody at the table ever left a spoonful behind. It is one of those dishes that tastes like being taken care of. Have you ever noticed how the food that shows up in hard times is almost always the food you crave in good times too? Number 97, cheese ball. Number 97, rolled onto the coffee table at every party you can remember. You beat softened cream cheese with a little grated sharp cheddar, a splash of Worcestershire, some grated onion and garlic, maybe a dash of hot sauce. Then shape the whole thing into a fat ball with your hands. You rolled it in chopped pecans or dried parsley, wrapped it in wax paper, and chilled it until firm. Then set it out surrounded by a fan of Ritz crackers. It was the centerpiece of the coffee table, the thing guests circled while they talked. Cream cheese had become an everyday staple, and the cheese ball turned it into something you could make ahead and carry to a neighbor's house without a second thought. The outside crust of nuts gave way to a soft, tangy, savory center that spread like a dream on a buttery cracker. It looked impressive, but any beginner could make one, which is why it appeared at office parties, New Year's Eve, and church socials. All through the decade, the only real danger was setting it out too early and letting it sweat in a warm room. Somewhere along the way, the cheese ball started to feel dated, pushed aside for fancier boards of imported cheese. But there is a reason it keeps coming back around at the holidays. It is generous, it is friendly, and it invites people to gather close and dig in. Was there a certain relative whose cheese ball you looked for the moment you walked in the door? Number 96. Green bean casserole. At number 96 sits the dish that owned every holiday table in America. You mixed cut green beans with a can of cream of mushroom soup and a splash of milk, poured it into a baking dish, and crowned it with a can of French fried onions. It went in the oven until it bubbled at the edges, and the last handful of those crispy onions went on top for the final few minutes so they stayed shattering crisp. The folks at Campbell's dreamed it up in the 1950s as a way to sell more soup, and by the 1970s, it had become as fixed to Thanksgiving as the turkey itself. What made it stick was pure convenience meeting real comfort. 3 ingredients, 1 dish, no fussing, and it fed a whole table of relatives. The creamy mushroom sauce coated the tender beans, and those fried onions gave you salt and crunch that made the whole thing sing. The complaints came later, from cooks who wanted fresh beans and homemade sauce, and thought the canned version was cheating. But there is a warmth to the simple original that the fancy versions never quite catch. It was the taste of the good tablecloth coming out, and the folding chairs squeaking open. Say what you want about the can of soup, but that casserole meant everybody was home. For millions of families, the smell of it warming in the oven was the first sign that the whole clan was about to squeeze around one long table. Do you still hear the crinkle of that French fried onion can when you think of the holidays? Number 95. Broccoli rice casserole. Number 95 is the creamy, cheesy bake that stretched a little into a lot. You cooked white rice, stirred in chopped broccoli, a can of cream of mushroom or celery soup, and a good scoop of cheese whiz or cubed Velveeta melted right in, sometimes with sauteed onion for depth. You spread it in a dish and baked it until it set, and the cheese pulled into strings when you scooped it. This one lived at holiday dinners and covered dish suppers, especially across the South and Midwest, where it fed a big family without emptying the grocery envelope. The processed cheese was the secret. It melted smooth and never broke, giving you that velvety, salty richness that clung to every grain of rice. Broccoli was the vegetable of the era, the one that made you feel you were serving something green and good for the children, even buried in cheese and cream. The downside, of course, was that it was rich enough to be its own meal, and a little went a long way. But at a table crowded with people, a warm pan of it disappeared fast. It was the kind of dish somebody always asked you to bring again. Rice, cheese, and a green vegetable, all in one forgiving pan. You could stretch one pan of it to feed a dozen relatives, which is why it showed up at reunions, where the cousins spilled out onto the porch, and the folding chairs never seemed to be enough. Can you remember the particular smell of that casserole coming out of the oven on a cold Sunday? Number 94. Onion dip. Coming in at number 94 is the dip that launched 1,000 parties. You stirred 1 envelope of Lipton dry onion soup, mix into a container of sour cream, and that was the whole recipe. You let it rest for an hour so the dried onions softened and the flavor bloomed, then set it out with a big bowl of ridged potato chips. It got the nickname California dip back in the 1950s, after a home cook combined those 2 supermarket products, and by the 1970s, it was the unofficial dip of the nation. Nothing was faster. 2 ingredients, 1 bowl, no heat, and you had a crowd pleaser that men and children and grandmothers all reached for. The toasted onion flavor gave the cool, tangy sour cream a savory depth that plain chips could never manage alone. The only trick was the weight. made too fast and eaten right away. It tasted flat, but given an hour in the refrigerator, it turned into something you could not stop scooping. It rode along to every game day, every card night, every backyard cookout. Fancy dips came later, loaded with spinach and artichokes and roasted garlic, but none of them beat the simple satisfaction of that first ridged chip, loaded with onion dip. It was the taste of a good evening about to begin. Half the fun was watching the bowl empty faster than anyone would admit, the ridged chips scraping the sides, until somebody finally tipped it up to get the very last of it. Did you ever catch yourself eating it straight off the spoon when nobody was looking? Number 93. Copper penny carrots. Number 93 is the bright, tangy carrot salad that lived in every church cookbook. You boiled sliced carrots until just tender, so each round looked like a shiny copper penny. Then toss them warm into a sweet and sour marinade of tomato soup, vinegar, sugar, oil, and a little mustard, with rings of onion and green pepper folded through. It sat in the refrigerator for a day, soaking up all that glossy dressing, and it only got better as it waited. This was a make-ahead marvel, the kind of dish a woman could put together on Thursday and serve all weekend. And it held up beautifully on a hot potluck table, where creamy salads turned dangerous. The carrots stayed with a little bite, sweet and sharp at the same time, and the peppers and onion gave it crunch and color. It was thrifty too, built from a bag of carrots and a can of soup, feeding a crowd for next to nothing. Some folks found it strange that tomato soup went into a carrot salad, and that odd combination is part of why it faded away. But one taste of that sweet-sour glaze, and you understand why it stayed on the covered dish table for decades. It was pretty on the plate and easy on the wallet. You could keep a covered bowl of it in the icebox for the better part of a week, spooning some onto a plate whenever you needed a bright, tangy bite beside whatever else was for supper. When did a humble bag of carrots last turn into something people asked for the recipe of? Number 92. Harvard beets. Number 92 brings out the ruby red beets in their glossy sweet-sour sauce. You cooked beets until tender, sliced or diced them, then bathed them in a thickened sauce of sugar, vinegar, and a little cornstarch, sometimes with a pat of butter stirred in at the end for shine. The sauce turned clear and syrupy, and coated every piece in a tangy, sweet glaze. That made even beet doubters take a second helping. The name goes back generations, well before the 1970s, but this was a dish that held its place on New England and Midwestern tables right through the decade. Many families used their own home-canned beets from the summer garden, which made this a taste of the pantry shelf in the dead of winter. The beets brought an earthy sweetness, and the vinegar cut right through it, so the whole thing landed bright instead of heavy. The trouble was the color. Those beets stained everything they touched: fingers, cutting boards, the good tablecloth, and a younger generation decided the mess was not worth it. But that jewel-red glisten on a white plate was a beautiful thing, and the flavor was livelier than most people expect from a beet. It was old-fashioned in the best sense. Many a cook wore an apron and stood back from the pot just to keep from turning red, and still ended up with pink fingertips for a day. A small price for that glossy, jewel-toned bowl. Do you remember the way pickled and glazed beets turned a plain supper into something that felt a little special? Number 91. Tomato aspic. Number 91 is the dish that startles the young and comforts the old. The quivering tomato gelatin salad. You dissolved plain gelatin into hot tomato juice, seasoned with a little vinegar, Worcestershire, and a squeeze of lemon, poured it into a ring mold, and chilled it until it set into a trembling red crown. Some cooks folded in chopped celery, onion, and green pepper for crunch, and the fancy version hid shrimp or crab inside. You unmolded it onto a bed of lettuce and often crowned it with a dollop of mayonnaise. Mid-century entertaining loved this one. A savory gelatin salad that showed off a hostess who owned a mold and knew how to use it. Gelatin had been sold to American kitchens as modern and elegant, and the aspic was the grown-up, sophisticated cousin of the sweet Jell-O salads. The flavor surprised people. It was bright and savory, a little tangy, cool and refreshing on a summer plate. But the texture is exactly where it lost the next generation, who could not get past a red vegetable that wobbled. That wobble, though, was the whole charm to the people who grew up with it. It looked like something from a magazine and tasted like a cold, Bloody Mary you could slice. Setting it out was a small act of daring, the kind of dish that got the whole room talking whether they loved it or eyed it with deep suspicion. Would you be brave enough to set a shimmering tomato aspic on the table at your next holiday and watch the room react? Number 90, cheese fondue. Number 90 pulled everyone off the couch and around a bubbling pot. You rubbed the inside of a heavy pot with a cut clove of garlic, warmed dry white wine, then melted in handfuls of shredded Swiss and Gruyere, tossed with a little flour so the cheese stayed smooth. Finishing with a splash of kirsch and a grate of nutmeg, you set the pot over a small flame in the middle of the table, handed everybody a long fork, and passed a basket of cubed crusty bread. This was the social heart of a 1970s evening. Fondue was not just dinner, it was an event. The reason you bought the avocado-colored pot with the little burner in the first place. The rule everyone knew was that if your bread fell off the fork into the cheese, you owed a kiss or a favor to the table. And that little game kept a dinner party warm and loud for hours. The cheese came out silky and boozy and deeply savory, clinging to the bread in long golden ropes. Down at the bottom of the pot, a crust formed that the host scraped up and shared like a prize. The trouble was that cheese fondue turned stubborn if the heat ran too high, seizing into a rubbery lump that no one could rescue. Done right, though, it was pure connection, a slow meal where people talked and laughed and lingered. It made a Tuesday feel like an occasion. When did dinner last ask you to slow down and share one pot with the people you love? Number 89, scalloped corn. Number 89 is the humble corn casserole that anchored 100 Sunday dinners. You stirred together a can of creamed corn, a can of whole kernel corn, beaten eggs, crushed saltines, or a box of corn muffin mix, melted butter and a splash of milk, then baked it until the center set and the top browned into a golden crust. Some cooks scattered crushed crackers or a little cheese over the top for extra crunch. It came straight out of farm country, where sweet corn grew tall and cheap, and it turned the summer harvest, fresh or canned, into a warm and custardy side that stretched to feed a big table. It rode along to church suppers and holiday spreads because it was forgiving and cheap, and everybody liked it. From the smallest child to the oldest grandfather, the inside was soft and sweet, almost like a savory spoon bread, while the top gave a little resistance under the fork. The knock against it was that it leaned sweet and heavy, more comfort than nutrition, and the health-minded cooks of later years set it aside. But there was nothing like the smell of it baking, corn and butter, and toasting crumbs filling a cold kitchen. It was cheap enough for the leanest week and good enough for the finest holiday, which is a rare thing in any recipe. It asked for almost nothing and gave back a whole pan of comfort. Does the smell of corn and butter in the oven still take you straight back to your grandmother's kitchen? Number 88, pea salad. Number 88 is the cold, creamy pea salad that turned up at every summer gathering. You folded together sweet green peas, cubes of sharp cheddar, chopped celery, and diced onion, bound it all with mayonnaise, and sometimes crumbled bacon over the top for salt and smoke. You chilled it well and served it cold, straight from the refrigerator, and it was the kind of thing that tasted even better on the second day. This was a Southern and Midwestern staple, an easy make-ahead dish for the woman who had 6 other things to cook and needed one that could wait in the icebox. The peas gave little bursts of sweetness, the cheese added chew and richness, and the onion and celery kept it from turning to mush. Frozen peas were cheap and always on hand, so this salad cost almost nothing to build and fed a whole crowd. Some families swore by adding hard-boiled egg, others insisted on a pinch of sugar in the dressing, and every household guarded its own small variations. The downside was simple. It leaned heavy on mayonnaise, which meant it could not sit long in the sun, and the modern crowd found it a touch old-fashioned. But there was real comfort in that cold, creamy bite on a hot afternoon, the cheddar and peas playing off each other just right. It was the definition of a dish that fed people without any fuss. Did your family have a special bowl that only came out when the pea salad did? Number 87, rumaki. Number 87 is the little bacon-wrapped bite that made a party feel exotic. You wrapped a strip of bacon around a slice of water chestnut and a piece of chicken liver, pinned it with a toothpick, marinated the bundles in soy sauce, brown sugar, and a little ginger, then baked or broiled them until the bacon crisped and the glaze turned sticky and dark. You served them hot on a platter, and they vanished almost as fast as you set them down. Rumaki came riding in on the tiki and Polynesian craze that swept America, when a suburban den with a bamboo bar and paper lanterns felt like a passport to the islands. The bacon gave salt and smoke, the water chestnut stayed crisp and cool inside, and the chicken liver melted into something rich and savory that surprised people who thought they did not like liver. The sweet salty marinade tied it all together into one perfect 2-bite package. The work was fussy, wrapping and pinning each little bundle by hand, which is exactly why it disappeared, as party food got faster and simpler. But it looked impressive on the tray and tasted like nothing else at the buffet. For a generation, it was the height of at-home sophistication, the thing you served when you wanted guests to feel you had gone to some trouble. The smell of that soy and brown sugar glaze bubbling under the broiler could pull a whole party toward the kitchen before the tray ever reached the table. Do you remember a host who owned a real tiki bar and served bites like these on little bamboo picks? Number 86, hot German potato salad. Number 86 warms up the potato salad and turns it on its head. Instead of cold and creamy, this one came to the table hot. The potatoes coated in a tangy bacon dressing instead of mayonnaise. You fried bacon until crisp, cooked sliced onion in the drippings, then stirred in vinegar, a little sugar, and a splash of water to make a sweet sour dressing that you poured over sliced boiled potatoes while everything was still warm. The crumbled bacon went back in, and the potatoes drank up that glossy dressing until each slice was tangy and rich. This came straight from German immigrant kitchens that settled deep into the Midwest, and it stayed a fixture at family suppers, fish fries, and church picnics across those communities. Serving it hot meant it was safe on a summer table where a mayonnaise salad might spoil, which made it a practical choice as well as a delicious one. The flavor was bold and bright, the vinegar and bacon fat cutting through the soft starch of the potato in a way that woke up your whole mouth. The complaint was minor. It took more work than dumping potatoes in mayonnaise, and it had to be timed to come out warm. But that warm, tangy, smoky bite was worth every extra minute at the stove. It felt like a hug and a wake-up call at the same time. Have you ever had a potato salad so good you forgot it was supposed to be cold? Number 85, frozen fruit salad. Number 85 is the make-ahead salad you sliced like a loaf of bread. You beat softened cream cheese with mayonnaise or whipped cream, folded in crushed pineapple, chopped maraschino cherries, banana, and sometimes chopped nuts and mini marshmallows, then packed it into a loaf pan and froze it solid. When company came, you turned it out, sliced it into pretty pink rounds, and laid each slice on a leaf of lettuce. This was the ultimate do-ahead dish, and that was its whole reason for being. A hostess could make it a week in advance, keep it in the freezer, and pull it out the moment she needed a colorful, festive side, without lifting a finger that day. The frozen texture was the surprise, cool and creamy, and almost like ice cream, but studded with the chew of fruit and the pop of a cherry. The cream cheese gave it tang, the pineapple gave it brightness, and the whole thing looked like something from a magazine on the plate. The catch was that it had to stay cold, softening fast in a warm room into a sweet puddle, so timing mattered. But on a hot holiday, that frozen slice was a small miracle, a dessert pretending to be a salad and getting away with it completely. It was thrift and showmanship in one pretty pink loaf, turned out of the pan and cut into neat pink rounds. It looked like a fancy dessert from a bakery case, though it had waited quietly in your freezer for a week. When did you last see a salad you had to slice with a knife? Number 84, pimiento cheese. Number 84 spreads the beloved orange goodness that the South calls its own caviar. You grated sharp cheddar by hand, stirred and chopped jarred pimientos, plenty of mayonnaise, a little grated onion, and a shake of black pepper, then mashed it all into a thick, spreadable paste. You slathered it between white bread for sandwiches, piped it into celery sticks, or set out a bowl with crackers for company. Across the South, it was everyday food, packed into lunchboxes spread at church dinners, and kept in a bowl in the refrigerator for whenever hunger struck. The beauty was in how humble and how flexible it was. A block of cheese, a jar of pimientos, and a spoonful of mayonnaise turned into something that could feed a child after school or dress up a party tray. The flavor was sharp and creamy, and just a little sweet from the peppers, with a tang that plain cheese never had. Every family made it a little differently. Some with a dash of hot sauce, some with a hard-boiled egg mashed in, and folks argued their version was the only right one. The one rule everyone agreed on was that you grated the cheese yourself, because the pre-shredded kind never melted into the same silky spread. It faded from national attention for a while, dismissed as plain country food. But there is nothing plain about that first bite on a soft slice of bread. Did your family keep a bowl of it in the icebox at all times, ready for anybody who walked in hungry? Number 83. Creamed pearl onions. Number 83 brings out the little white onions swimming in a silky white sauce. You peeled tiny pearl onions, simmered them until tender and sweet, then folded them into a creamy bechamel made from butter, flour, and milk, seasoned simply with salt, pepper, and a little nutmeg. The onions turned soft and mild, losing all their bite, and the sauce wrapped each one in a warm, buttery blanket. This was a holiday dish, the kind that came out only for Thanksgiving and Christmas, tucked among the turkey and the dressing on a table already groaning with food. Peeling all those tiny onions was a labor of patience, often handed to whichever child or aunt could be talked into standing at the sink. And that shared work was part of the ritual. The reward was a side that was gentle and elegant, sweet and creamy, a soft counterpoint to the heavier, saltier dishes around it. Some cooks scattered buttered breadcrumbs or a little cheese on top and browned it in the oven for contrast. The trouble was all that peeling, a tedious job that fell out of fashion. The moment convenience took over the kitchen, frozen and canned onions never quite matched the fresh ones, and slowly the dish slipped off the holiday table. But that mild, creamy sweetness was a quiet pleasure, the kind of old-fashioned side that made a feast feel complete. Do you remember somebody in your family patiently peeling a whole bowl of those tiny onions just for one meal a year? Number 82. 3-bean salad. Number 82 is the tangy marinated bean salad that could sit on a picnic table all afternoon without a worry. You drained cans of green beans, wax beans, and kidney beans, tossed them with thinly sliced onion and green pepper, then poured over a sweet and sour dressing of vinegar, oil, and sugar, and let it all marinate in the refrigerator overnight. The longer it sat, the better it got, the beans drinking up that bright, sharp dressing until every bite was glossy and zippy. As a potluck traveler, it had no equal, and that is exactly why it earned its place. With no mayonnaise to spoil, it was safe in the sun at every summer cookout, church picnic, and family reunion, and it only improved as the day wore on. The 3 beans gave you 3 textures: the crisp tender green and wax beans against the soft, meaty kidney beans, and the peppers and onion added crunch and color. It was cheap, built almost entirely from cans off the pantry shelf, and it fed a crowd for a few coins. The one complaint was that it leaned sweet and sharp, a little aggressive for people who wanted something creamy and mild. But on a hot day next to the grilled meat, that cold, tangy bean salad was exactly the bright note the plate needed. It was thrift and flavor married in a single bowl. Did you ever notice how the beans tasted better the second day, after a night in that vinegar dressing? Number 81. Cocktail weenies. Number 81 is the sweet and tangy little sausage that simmered on the back of every party stove. You dropped a package of cocktail wiener or sliced smoked sausage into a saucepan with a jar of grape jelly and a bottle of chili sauce, warmed it until the jelly melted into a glossy, dark glaze, and kept the whole thing hot in a slow cooker with a box of toothpicks beside it. Guests speared them one after another, and the pot never seemed to empty fast enough. This was the effortless party food of the era, the dish you could throw together in 5 minutes and set out to simmer while you got dressed for the guests. The magic was in that unlikely sauce, where sweet grape jelly and tangy, slightly spicy chili sauce came together into a sticky glaze that tasted far better than it had any right to. The little sausages soaked it all up, turning sweet and savory and just a touch spicy. The perfect two-bite nibble with a cold drink in your other hand. It cost almost nothing, needed no skill, and pleased every guest from the children to the grandparents. The only knock was that it was unapologetically simple, built from a jar and a bottle, which the fancier hosts eventually looked down on. But those little weenies always disappeared first, no matter what else was on the table. Have you ever met a person who could walk past a slow cooker of those glazed little sausages without reaching for a toothpick? Number 80, Southern Pear Salad. Number 80 is the dainty salad that looked like a little work of art on the plate. You set a canned pear, half cut side up on a leaf of iceberg lettuce, dropped a dollop of mayonnaise into the hollow, sprinkled shredded cheddar over the top, and crowned it with a single maraschino cherry. That was the whole thing, assembled in seconds and looking like something from a lady's luncheon. Southern hospitality shrank down into a single plate here. The salad a hostess served when she wanted the table to look pretty without spending an hour in the kitchen. Canned pears were cheap and always in the pantry, and this dish dressed them up into something that felt special and even a little fancy. The flavors were a study in contrast. The sweet, soft pear against the sharp cheddar and the tangy mayonnaise, with that bright cherry adding a sweet little pop on top. It showed up at bridal showers, church luncheons, and Sunday dinners. One perfect portion set at each place. The combination of fruit, cheese, and mayonnaise struck later generations as strange, and that oddness is exactly why it slipped away. But there was real charm in that little composed plate, and the taste won over almost everyone who was brave enough to try it. It was proof that a can of pears could become a moment of grace. Did your grandmother set one of these delicate pear salads at every single place before the guests sat down? Number 79, cheese straws. Number 79 is the crisp, sharp cheese cracker that no Southern party could do without. You worked grated sharp cheddar into flour, butter, salt, and a good shake of cayenne, then pushed the dough through a cookie press or piped it into long ribbons and baked them into crunchy, cheesy sticks with a little heat on the finish. Some cooks shaped them into thin straws, others into small rounds, and every kitchen kept a tin of them ready for drop-in company. These were the aristocrat of homemade snacks in the South, served at weddings, holidays, and cocktail parties on the good silver tray. Making them took real effort, working the dough just right and pressing out each straw by hand. And that care was part of the gift when you brought a tin to a friend. The flavor was bold, all sharp cheddar and buttery crumble with a slow warmth from the cayenne that built as you ate. They shattered when you bit them, light and crisp, and it was impossible to eat just one. A good tin of cheese straws was a treasured hostess gift, the kind of thing a woman was known for around town. They faded as store-bought snack crackers took over, and fewer people kept a cookie press in the drawer. But a homemade cheese straw is a different creature entirely, and one bite reminds you why they mattered. Did you know a lady whose cheese straws were so famous that people requested them by name at every gathering? Number 78, succotash. Number 78 is the simple corn and bean dish with roots deeper than almost anything else on this list. You combined sweet corn kernels with lima beans, warmed them in butter with a little cream or milk, and seasoned it plainly with salt and pepper, sometimes adding chopped tomato, bell pepper, or a bit of bacon for depth. The name and the dish itself come from Native American cooking, where corn and beans grew together and were eaten together for good reason, and it carried straight into American home kitchens for generations. By the 1970s, it was a familiar summer side, made fresh when the garden came in, and from frozen or canned the rest of the year. The corn brought sweetness, the limas brought a creamy, earthy heartiness, and the butter tied them together into something greater than either alone. It was cheap and filling, a way to stretch the garden and fill a plate without meat. The trouble was the lima bean, which a lot of children decided they hated on sight, and that stubborn dislike helped push the dish toward the edges of the table over time. But cooked right, with good butter and a little cream, succotash was tender and comforting and quietly delicious. It carried the taste of the summer garden right into the depths of winter. Made with good butter and a little cream when the garden corn and the fresh limas came in together, it tasted like the middle of August captured in a single bowl. Have you ever tasted a plate of buttery corn and limas and understood why people ate it for hundreds of years? Number 77, Carrot raisin salad. Number 77 is the sweet and crunchy little salad that packed into every school lunch tray. You grated fresh carrots, tossed them with plump raisins, bound it all with a little mayonnaise, and often added crushed pineapple for extra sweetness and a splash of juice. You chilled it for an hour so the flavors came together, and the raisins softened into the dressing. This was a wholesome, kid-friendly side, the kind cafeteria cooks and busy mothers reached for because children actually ate it without a fight. Carrots and raisins were cheap and kept forever, so the salad cost almost nothing and could be thrown together in minutes. The flavor was bright and sweet, the fresh crunch of grated carrot against the chewy burst of raisin, with the pineapple lifting the whole thing into dessert territory. It felt like a treat, while quietly being a serving of vegetables, which is why parents loved it as much as the kids did. Some folks pushed it further with shredded coconut or chopped nuts, and every family had its own preferred sweetness. The knock was that it could turn a little too sweet and a little too soft if it sat too long, drifting away from salad and toward candy. But that cheerful orange bowl was a small joy on a plain weekday plate, and it made eating your vegetables feel like a reward. Do you remember the way that sweet grated carrot and raisin tasted in the middle of an ordinary school day? Number 76, chocolate fondue. Number 76 turns the fondue pot toward dessert and ends the evening on a sweet note. You melted chocolate with a little cream and sometimes a splash of liqueur, kept it warm over a low flame, and set out platters of strawberries, banana chunks, marshmallows, pound cake cubes, and pineapple for dipping. Everyone gathered around with long forks again, this time reaching into a pot of warm, glossy chocolate. If the cheese fondue opened the party, this closed it, the sweet finale that kept guests lingering at the table long after the meal was done. It was interactive and a little indulgent, the kind of dessert that felt like play, where grown adults dipped fruit in cake and laughed like children. The warm chocolate coated everything in a thin, glossy shell that set slightly as it cooled, and the contrast of hot chocolate against a cold strawberry was pure pleasure. It looked luxurious but cost very little, a few bars of chocolate and whatever fruit was around. The danger was letting the chocolate get too hot and seize, or letting it sit until it turned thick and grainy. So a gentle flame was everything. Done right, though, it was a slow, sweet communal ending to a night with friends. It made dessert into an experience instead of just a course. Long after the plates were cleared, guests kept lingering at the table, spearing one more strawberry or one more cube of pound cake, unwilling to let the evening end. When did dessert last bring everyone you love around one warm pot to share? Number 75, squash casserole. Number 75 is the creamy yellow squash bake that used up the summer's overflowing garden. You cooked sliced yellow squash and onion until soft, drained them well, then stirred in beaten egg, sour cream or a can of soup, shredded cheese, and a scoop of crushed crackers. Spread it in a dish and topped it with buttered cracker crumbs before baking until golden and bubbling. Few dishes were more practical in a southern garden kitchen, born of the plain fact that summer squash grows faster than any family can eat it. When the plants were producing more than anyone knew what to do with, this casserole turned that glut into a warm, cheesy, comforting dish that made squash disappear off the plate. The texture was soft and custardy inside, rich with cheese and cream, while the buttered cracker top gave a satisfying crunch. It was cheap, since the squash was often free from the backyard, and it fed a big table with just a few pantry additions. It appeared at church suppers and Sunday dinners all summer long, a reliable way to serve a vegetable that people would actually eat. The complaint was that it was rich and soft, more casserole than crisp vegetable, and the lighter cooking of later years pushed it aside. But that golden, cheesy pan was pure comfort, and it solved the eternal summer problem of too much squash. Did your family ever have so much squash from the garden that this casserole appeared week after week? Number 74, strawberry pretzel salad. Number 74 is the three-layer wonder that could not decide if it was a salad or a dessert. You pressed crushed pretzels mixed with butter and a little sugar into a pan and baked them into a salty, crunchy crust. Spread a layer of sweetened cream cheese and whipped topping over it. Then poured strawberry jello studded with sliced strawberries on top and chilled it until the whole thing set. When you cut it, You got 3 distinct layers in every square. This was the star of the covered dish table, the dish that drew a crowd the moment it appeared. The salty pretzel crust against the sweet, tangy cream cheese, and the bright strawberry gelatin was a combination that hit every note at once, and people could not get enough of it. It was showy and fun, and it traveled well to potlucks and holidays, where a pretty dessert salad was always welcome. Building the 3 layers took a little patience and timing, since the gelatin had to be cool, but not set before it went over the cream cheese, or it would melt right through. But the payoff was worth the care. A dish that looked as good as it tasted. It got filed under salad only because of the gelatin, a technicality nobody minded when they went back for a second square. It was sweet and salty perfection in a single pan. Have you ever tasted that snap of salty pretzel under sweet strawberry and understood why people fought over the last piece? Number 73. Sausage balls. Number 73 is the 3-ingredient bite that filled every holiday morning and party platter. You mixed uncooked breakfast sausage with a couple cups of Bisquick baking mix and a big pile of shredded sharp cheddar. Worked it together with your hands until it came together, rolled it into little balls, and baked them until they were browned and crisp outside and savory inside. They came out of the oven hot, and a tray of them rarely lasted an hour. These were the definition of easy party food, and their genius was in that short ingredient list. The baking mix already had everything it needed, so 3 items, and a pair of hands turned into 24 golden bites with no fuss at all. The flavor was pure savory comfort. The spiced sausage and sharp cheese bound in a tender, biscuity crumb, good hot from the oven, and nearly as good at room temperature. They were the perfect thing to bring to a brunch, a tailgate, or a Christmas morning, and they could be rolled ahead and frozen raw for whenever you needed them. It was hard to find a fault, though some cooks fussed that the mix could turn them dry if you overbaked them even a little. Rolled and pulled from the oven at just the right minute, they were irresistible. They made a house smell like a holiday. Do you remember a certain platter of these that appeared every single Christmas morning like clockwork? Number 72. Creamed peas and new potatoes. Number 72 is the tender spring side that tasted like the first warm days of the year. You boiled small new potatoes in their thin skins until just tender, cooked fresh green peas alongside, then folded them both into a simple cream sauce, made from butter, flour, and milk, seasoned with just salt and pepper. The little potatoes and the sweet peas came together in a warm, silky white sauce that coated every bite. It was a celebration of spring, the dish that marked the first tiny potatoes and the first sweet peas coming out of the garden, and it carried real seasonal meaning for families who grew their own. The waxy new potatoes stayed firm and creamy, the peas popped with sweetness, and the gentle sauce tied them into something soft and comforting without ever being heavy. It was humble food, built from the garden and the milk jug, but it felt like a small reward for a long winter waiting for the ground to warm. It often appeared alongside the Easter ham, or the first Sunday supper of the spring, a bright and tender counterpoint to the meat. The catch was that it was best with genuinely fresh peas and tiny new potatoes, and it lost some of its magic made from frozen or full-grown spuds. But at the peak of the season, it was a quiet triumph. Did the first creamed peas and new potatoes of the year ever feel like a little holiday all their own? Number 71. Waldorf salad. Number 71 is the crisp and creamy fruit salad that came dressed for a fancy occasion. You tossed together chopped tart apples, sliced celery, plump raisins, and chopped walnuts, then bound it all in a light dressing of mayonnaise and served it cool on a leaf of lettuce. Some cooks added grapes or a little whipped cream to soften and sweeten it, though it was born in a grand hotel long before. By the 1970s, the Waldorf salad had settled comfortably into home kitchens as a refined but easy side for a special dinner. The appeal was in the contrast of textures, the crisp snap of apple and celery against the soft chew of raisin and the rich crunch of walnut, all pulled together by the cool, tangy dressing. It felt elegant without being difficult, the kind of thing a hostess served to signal that this was a nicer meal than an everyday supper. It was fresh and light, next to heavier holiday fare, a welcome bite of crunch and brightness on a crowded plate. It cost little more than a few apples and a handful of nuts, yet it carried an air of the fine dining room it came from. The knock was that the apples browned, and the celery wilted if it sat too long, so it was best made close to serving, but fresh and cold. It was a small, crisp pleasure with a touch of class. Have you ever served a dish that felt fancy, even though it took you barely 10 minutes to make? Number 70, Chex Party Mix. Number 70 is the toasty, buttery snack mix that filled the big bowl at every holiday gathering. You tossed together the three kinds of Chex cereal, corn, rice, and wheat, with pretzel sticks, mixed nuts, and little bagel chips or crackers. Drizzled the whole thing with melted butter, Worcestershire sauce, garlic powder, and seasoned salt. Then baked it low and slow, stirring every so often, until every piece turned crisp and coated and golden. The smell of it toasting filled the whole house for an hour. This was the homemade snack of the season, a recipe printed right on the cereal box that families made by the roasting pan full every December. It sat out in a big bowl for grazing, the kind of thing you passed on the way through the kitchen and grabbed a handful of a dozen times a day. The flavor was savory and buttery, and a little tangy from the Worcestershire. And the joy was in the variety. Each handful a different mix of crunchy cereal, salty pretzel, and toasted nut. It was cheap to make and made a huge batch, so there was always plenty for company and for stashing in tins as gifts. The only trouble was that it vanished faster than you could make it, and the good pieces always got picked out first. But that buttery, garlicky crunch was the taste of the holidays for a whole generation. Do you remember reaching into a big bowl of this warm from the oven and fishing out your favorite pieces? Number 69. Glazed carrots. Number 69 is the sweet and glossy carrot side that made a vegetable taste like a treat. You cook sliced or baby carrots until tender, then toss them in a glaze of butter and brown sugar until they turned shiny and caramelized, sometimes with a spoonful of honey or a splash of orange juice for extra depth. The sugar and butter melted into a syrup that coated each carrot in a sweet, buttery shine. Here was the vegetable that got children to eat their carrots, a plain trick of butter and brown sugar that turned an ordinary root into something almost like candy. It was a fixture at holiday tables and Sunday dinners, an easy side that added a bright orange glow and a touch of sweetness to a heavy plate. The carrots stayed tender with a little bite, and the glaze gave them a caramel edge that balanced the earthiness of the vegetable underneath. It was cheap and quick, made from a bag of carrots and a couple of pantry staples, and it never failed to please the pickiest eater at the table. The knock was that it leaned sweet, more dessert than vegetable in the eyes of the health-minded cooks who came later. But there was real comfort in that glossy, buttery bite, and it made carrots something people actually looked forward to. It brightened up the whole plate. Did a spoonful of buttery glazed carrots ever make you forget you were eating a vegetable at all? Number 68. Clam dip. Number 68 is the cool, briny dip that meant the party had officially started. You beat softened cream cheese until smooth, stirred in a drained can of minced clams, a squeeze of lemon, a shake of Worcestershire, some grated onion, and a little of the clam juice to loosen it, then chilled it and served it with a mountain of ridged potato chips. The dip firmed up in the refrigerator and thickened into a creamy, savory spread flecked with tender bits of clam. This was cocktail hour food, the sophisticated cousin of the onion dip, the thing a hostess set out to make a gathering feel a little more grown-up. Canned clams brought a taste of the sea to a landlocked suburb, and mixed into tangy cream cheese, they turned into something that felt fancy, but took only minutes to make. The flavor was rich and briny and bright, the lemon and Worcestershire cutting through the cream, and it clung perfectly to a sturdy ridged chip. It appeared at New Year's Eve parties and cocktail get-togethers, sitting beside the highball glasses and the little dishes of nuts. The one caution was that it needed real chilling to set up and let the flavors marry, so a rushed batch tasted thin and flat. Given its hour in the icebox, though, it was a scoopable delight. It was the flavor of adults dressing up and staying out late. Did the appearance of a bowl of clam dip tell you the grown-ups were about to have a real party? Number 67. Corn pudding. Number 67 is the soft, custardy corn dish that sat somewhere between a side and a dessert. You whisked together eggs, milk or cream, a little sugar, melted butter, and a spoonful of flour, stirred in plenty of corn kernels, poured it into a dish, and baked it slowly until it set into a tender, quivering custard studded with sweet corn. The top browned lightly, while the inside stayed soft and spoonable. Southern kitchens treated it as a holiday classic, a richer and more delicate cousin of scalloped corn, the kind of dish that earned a permanent spot on the Thanksgiving table. Corn was cheap and beloved, and turning it into a silky custard felt like a small act of transformation. Humble kernels dressed up into something worthy of a feast. The flavor was gently sweet and deeply comforting, the eggs and cream giving the corn a smooth, luxurious body that melted on the tongue. It fed a crowd from a single dish, and paired with everything from ham to turkey to fried chicken. The care was in the baking, since a corn pudding could turn watery if underdone or rubbery if left too long. So a cook watched it closely for that just set jiggle in the center. Pulled at the right moment, it was pure velvet. It was the gentlest, most comforting thing on a groaning holiday table. Do you remember the way a good corn pudding trembled just slightly when you carried it to the table? Number 66, pigs in a blanket. Number 66 is the little sausage wrapped in dough that made every child's eyes light up. You wrapped small cocktail sausages, or cut hot dogs in a strip of crescent roll dough or biscuit dough, rolled them snug, and baked them until the dough puffed golden and the sausage warmed through inside. You served them hot with mustard and ketchup for dipping, and they disappeared off the tray in minutes. These were party food that spanned every age, equally at home at a child's birthday and an adult cocktail hour. The refrigerated dough that came in a pop-open tube made them almost effortless, and that convenience is exactly why they showed up everywhere in the decade. The pleasure was simple and complete, a savory, salty little sausage inside a warm, buttery, flaky blanket, the kind of two-bite treat that satisfied instantly. Kids loved dunking them, and grown-ups reached for them just as fast when nobody was watching. They cost next to nothing, and could be assembled ahead and baked at the last minute, which made them a busy host's best friend. It was hard to find anything wrong with them, though a purist might sniff that they were about as simple as cooking got. Simple was the whole point, and few things pleased a room full of people so completely. They were pure, uncomplicated joy on a toothpick. Did a tray of these ever come out at a party and vanish before the adults got a single one? Number 65, coleslaw. Number 65 is the cool, crunchy cabbage salad that rode alongside 1,000 summer meals. You shredded green cabbage and a little carrot, then dressed it with a creamy blend of mayonnaise, a splash of vinegar, a spoonful of sugar, and a shake of celery seed, tossing it all together and chilling it so the cabbage softened just slightly and drank up the tangy dressing. Some families made it sweet, some made it sharp, and every household guarded its own balance. This was the everyday companion to picnic and cookout food, the reliable cool bite that cut through fried chicken, barbecue, and hamburgers all summer long. Cabbage was cheap and kept for weeks, so a big bowl of slaw cost almost nothing and stretched to feed a whole gathering. The appeal was in that fresh, cold crunch against the creamy, tangy dressing, a refreshing counterpoint to hot and heavy grilled food. It traveled well to reunions and church picnics, and it only got better after an hour in the cooler. The complaint was that a heavy hand with the mayonnaise could drown it, turning crisp cabbage into a soggy mess. So the good cooks kept the dressing light. Done right, it stayed crunchy and bright to the last forkful. It was the humble, faithful side that showed up whenever the grill came out. A big covered bowl of it rode along in the cooler to every reunion and fish fry, and it was always among the first things spooned onto a crowded paper plate. Did your family lean toward the sweet slaw or the tangy slaw? And did anyone dare mix the two? Number 64, cranberry jello mold. Number 64 is the tart sweet gelatin salad that glistened on the holiday table like a jewel. You dissolved raspberry or cherry jello in hot water, stirred in whole berry cranberry sauce and crushed pineapple, folded in chopped walnuts and diced celery, then poured it into a decorative ring mold and chilled it until firm. When you turned it out onto a plate, it held the shape of the mold, ridged and shining and studded with fruit and nuts. It became a Thanksgiving and Christmas fixture. The cranberry served not from a can, but set proudly into a molded salad that showed off a little effort. The gelatin gave the tart cranberry a sweet, bouncy body, and the pineapple, walnuts, and celery added surprise textures in every cool bite. It was refreshing and light against the rich, heavy holiday plate, a bright red palate cleanser masquerading as a side dish. It could be made a day or two ahead, freeing up the oven and the cook's hands on the busy holiday itself. The one bit of drama was the unmolding, that nervous moment of dipping the mold in warm water and flipping it, praying the whole thing released clean instead of sticking in pieces. When it came out whole, it was a small triumph worth showing off. It was the prettiest thing on the table. Do you remember holding your breath as somebody flipped that mold over and hoped the whole ring slid out in one piece? Number 63. Stuffed mushrooms. Number 63 is the savory little bite that made a cocktail party feel elegant. You pop the stems from button mushrooms, chop them fine, and cook them with onion and garlic. Then mix that with breadcrumbs, grated cheese, herbs, and sometimes a little sausage or crab. Spoon the filling into each mushroom cap and bake them until the top's browned and the mushrooms turn tender and juicy. You serve them hot and guests pop them whole. This was party food with a touch of class. The kind of appetizer a host made to show the evening was a little more special than chips and dip. Mushrooms had become a fashionable ingredient, and stuffing them turned a plain button into an elegant two-bite morsel that looked like real work had gone into it. The flavor was rich and earthy, the tender mushroom cap giving way to a savory, cheesy, herb-flecked filling, warm and satisfying in a single bite. They dressed up a buffet and disappeared quickly, always among the first things gone from the tray. The catch was the fussy work of cleaning, hollowing, and filling each little cap by hand, a fussy chore that busier cooks eventually abandoned for easier fare. But that hot, savory bite was worth the trouble, and a tray of them signaled a host who cared. It felt fancy without being fussy to eat. Did a plate of hot stuffed mushrooms ever make a party feel just a little more grown-up and special? Number 62. Twice-baked potatoes. Number 62 is the loaded potato that came apart, got dressed up, and went back in the oven better than before. You baked russet potatoes until soft, sliced them in half, scooped out the fluffy insides, and mashed that with butter, sour cream, shredded cheese, and chives. Then piled the mixture back into the potato shells, topped them with more cheese, and baked them again until the tops browned and crisped. The result was a potato within a potato, creamy and rich inside a sturdy skin. Here was the fancy potato of the era, the side you made when a baked potato alone seemed too plain for company or a holiday. The double baking took a plain spud and turned it into something you could serve with pride, each half a complete little indulgence loaded with everything good. The inside was smooth and rich, all butter and sour cream and melted cheese, while the twice-baked shell gave a satisfying chew around the edges. They could be assembled ahead and baked off when guests arrived, which made them a favorite for entertaining. The only real cost was time, since baking a potato twice and filling each shell by hand took patience that a weeknight rarely allowed. But for a special dinner, that creamy, cheesy, golden-topped half was a small luxury. It made a humble potato feel like an occasion. Each half came to the table looking like its own little meal, the fork sinking through a crisp, cheesy top into a filling as rich and smooth as any restaurant could put out. Did a twice-baked potato ever feel like the fanciest thing on your holiday plate? Number 61. Popcorn balls. Number 61 is the sticky, sweet treat that meant autumn and Halloween had arrived. You popped a big batch of corn, poured over a hot syrup of sugar, corn syrup and butter, or sometimes melted marshmallows, then buttered your hands and pressed the sticky mixture into round balls. Before it cooled and hardened, you wrapped each one in wax paper, and they became treats for trick-or-treaters or gifts for the neighbors. Making them was a whole family affair, the kind of kitchen project where everyone got sticky hands, and somebody always burned a finger on the hot syrup. Homemade candy and treats were still common enough that a child might genuinely get a popcorn ball at the door on Halloween, wrapped by a neighbor's own hands. The pleasure was in the contrast, the light crunch of the popcorn held together in a sweet, chewy, slightly crisp shell of hardened syrup. Some cooks tinted them with food coloring, or studded them with peanuts or gumdrops for color and surprise. They cost almost nothing, a bag of popcorn and some sugar, yet they felt festive and special. The trouble was the timing, since the syrup had to be just cool enough to handle, but still warm enough to shape, and a moment too long meant a pan of candy too hard to work. Shaped at the right moment, though they were a seasonal delight. Do you remember getting a wax paper wrapped popcorn ball from a neighbor and knowing exactly whose house it came from? Number 60, fried okra. Number 60 is the crispy, golden bite that turned a slippery vegetable into pure southern pleasure. You sliced fresh okra into little rounds, tossed them in cornmeal, seasoned with salt and pepper, and fried them in hot oil until they turned crunchy and brown outside, while staying tender within. You drained them on a paper bag and ate them hot, straight from the skillet, often before they ever made it to the table. This was garden cooking at its finest, the answer to the summer okra patch that produced faster than anyone could keep up with. Okra has a reputation for sliminess that scares off the uninitiated, but frying it in cornmeal solved that problem completely, giving you crunch instead of goo and winning over even the doubters. The cornmeal crust shattered under your teeth, and the okra inside turned soft and mild, the whole thing salty and hot, and impossible to stop eating. It was cheap, since the okra came from the backyard, and it turned a humble vegetable into something people fought over. It showed up alongside fried chicken, black-eyed peas, and cornbread at Sunday dinners all across the South. The only real drawback was the frying itself, the hot oil and the spatter, and the standing over the stove, which pushed it towards special occasions as kitchens got busier. But that first crispy, salty bite made every minute at the skillet worthwhile. Have you ever stood at the stove and eaten fried okra straight from the pan before it could reach a plate? Number 59. Macaroni salad. Number 59 is the cool, creamy pasta salad that anchored the picnic table all summer long. You boiled elbow macaroni, cooled it, then folded it with mayonnaise, chopped celery, diced onion, bell pepper, and often a little grated carrot or sweet pickle relish, seasoning it with mustard, salt, and pepper. You chilled it for hours, and it turned into a cold, tangy, satisfying salad that got better the longer it sat. Nothing was more dependable at a cookout or a potluck, the big bowl that stretched to feed everyone and cost almost nothing to make. Elbow macaroni was cheap and filling, and a box of it plus a jar of mayonnaise turned into a mountain of salad for a crowd. The pleasure was in that cool, creamy comfort, the soft pasta, and the crunch of fresh vegetables bound in a tangy dressing, a refreshing bite next to hot grilled meat. Every family made it a little differently, some sweet with relish, some sharp with mustard, some loaded with hard-boiled egg, and each cook was sure their way was best. It traveled well and held up in the cooler, which made it a reliable friend at reunions and barbecues. The one caution was the mayonnaise, which meant it could not sit long in the summer heat, so you kept it on ice. Cold and creamy though, it was a summer staple nobody could resist. Did your family have a signature macaroni salad that showed up at every single cookout without fail? Number 58. Swedish meatballs. Number 58 is the tender little meatball in rich brown gravy that simmered at every holiday buffet. You mixed ground beef, sometimes with a little pork, with breadcrumbs soaked in milk, grated onion, egg, and a hint of nutmeg and allspice. Rolled the mixture into small balls, browned them, then simmered them in a creamy gravy, made from the pan drippings, broth, and a splash of sour cream. You kept them warm in a chafing dish with a box of toothpicks, and they never lasted long. This was elegant party food, with roots in Scandinavian kitchens, brought to America by immigrant families, and adopted into the holiday entertaining of the whole country. The little meatballs were softer and more delicately spiced than an Italian meatball, and that gentle warmth of nutmeg and allspice set them apart. The gravy was the heart of it, silky and rich and savory, coating each meatball and clinging to whatever you dipped in it. They worked as an appetizer speared on toothpicks, or as a main served over egg noodles, which made them endlessly useful. They could be made ahead and held warm for hours, a real gift to a host juggling a big party. The only labor was the rolling and browning of all those little balls, a patient job that took time. But that tender, saucy bite was a buffet favorite for good reason. Do you remember hovering near the chafing dish, spearing one Swedish meatball after another, when you thought no one noticed? Number 57. Broccoli cheese casserole. Number 57 is the rich, cheesy broccoli bake that made a green vegetable feel like an indulgence. You cooked broccoli until just tender, folded it into a sauce of cream of mushroom soup, mayonnaise, beaten egg, and shredded cheddar, spread it in a dish, and topped it with buttered cracker crumbs or crushed Ritz before baking until it bubbled and browned. The broccoli disappeared into a creamy, cheesy blanket that even the vegetable wary happily ate. It belonged to holiday and potluck cooking, a Southern and Midwestern staple that let a cook serve something green while still keeping it comforting and rich. Broccoli was the fashionable vegetable of the decade, and burying it in cheese and cream was how families got everyone to eat it, from the smallest child to the pickiest uncle. The flavor was savory and deeply comforting, the tender broccoli mellowed and enriched by the cheese sauce, with that buttery cracker top adding a welcome crunch. It fed a big table from one pan and could be assembled ahead, which made it a reliable choice for a busy holiday. The knock, as with so many casseroles of the era, was its richness, more decadent than nutritious once you counted the cheese, soup, and mayonnaise. But at a crowded table, a warm pan of it vanished fast. It turned a vegetable nobody fought for into a dish people asked seconds of. Did a cheesy broccoli casserole ever get your family's children to eat their vegetables without a single complaint? Number 56. Cucumber and onion salad. Number 56 is the cool, tangy garden salad that tasted like the middle of summer. You sliced fresh cucumbers and onions thin, layered them in a bowl, and covered them in a simple dressing of vinegar, water, a little sugar, and salt and pepper, sometimes with a splash of cream for a softer version. You let it sit in the refrigerator for a few hours so the cucumbers wilted slightly and soaked up the sweet-sour brine. This was the answer to a garden overflowing with cucumbers, a simple, refreshing way to use them up before they went soft. It cost almost nothing, built from the backyard in the vinegar bottle, and it came together in minutes with no cooking at all. The flavor was bright and puckery and cooling, the crisp cucumber and sharp onion mellowing into the tangy dressing, until each bite was crunchy and refreshing. It was the perfect foil to heavy summer cookout food, a light and acidic counterpoint to fried chicken and barbecue. Some families made the creamy version with sour cream and dill, others kept it sharp and clear with just vinegar, and both had their loyal fans. It got better as it sat, the cucumbers softening and the flavors deepening, so it was a natural make-ahead dish. There was little to complain about beyond the fact that it turned watery if it sat for days. Cold and fresh, it was summer in a bowl. Did a bowl of cucumbers and onions in vinegar ever cool you down on the hottest day of the year? Number 55. Rice Krispies Treats. Number 55 is the chewy, marshmallow sweet square that every child learned to make first. You melted butter and a bag of marshmallows together in a big pot, stirred in the crisped rice cereal until every piece was coated, then pressed the sticky mass into a buttered pan and let it cool before cutting it into squares. 3 ingredients, 1 pot, and no oven, which made it the recipe a mother handed to a child to make on their own. Every child of the era knew this treat, printed right on the cereal box, made for bake sales, lunchboxes, and rainy afternoons when the little ones needed something to do. The pleasure was pure and simple, the light crunch of the cereal held in a sweet, chewy, buttery marshmallow, a treat that was crisp and gooey at the same time. It cost next to nothing and came together in 10 minutes, which made it a favorite for last-minute school parties and church events. Every kitchen had its preferences, some cooks pressing them thin and firm, others thick and extra gooey with more marshmallow. The one bit of craft was not overheating the marshmallow, which could turn the squares hard and dry instead of soft and chewy. Made with a gentle hand, they stayed tender for days. It was often the very first thing a child ever cooked without a grown-up, a small rite of passage. Do you remember the first time you made a pan of these all by yourself, sticky hands and all? Number 54. Spinach Madeleine. Number 54 is the rich, spicy creamed spinach that came straight out of a Louisiana kitchen. You cooked chopped spinach, then folded it into a creamy sauce built on a roux with the reserved spinach liquid and evaporated milk, and melted in a roll of jalapeno cheese along with a little Worcestershire and cayenne for a savory, peppery kick. You could serve it as a side right away or bake it with buttered breadcrumbs on top for a party dish. This recipe came from a famous Baton Rouge community cookbook and spread across the South and beyond, carried from one church bazaar and one recipe card to the next. What set it apart was that jalapeno cheese, which gave the creamy spinach a warmth and a savory depth that plain creamed spinach never had. The flavor was rich and peppery and a little spicy, the smooth cream tempering the heat, with the spinach turning something ordinary into something memorable. It was a holiday side and a dinner party favorite, elegant enough for the good china but rooted in home cooking. It could be made ahead and baked off when guests arrived, a real convenience for entertaining. The only catch was that particular jalapeno cheese roll, a specific product that became harder to find over the years, which made the true original trickier to recreate. But that spicy, creamy spinach was a revelation to anyone who thought they disliked the vegetable. It won over the doubters every time. Have you ever tasted a creamed spinach with a little kick of pepper and wondered why all spinach could not taste like that? Number 53. Perfection salad. Number 53 is the crunchy, savory gelatin salad that packed vegetables into a shimmering mold. You dissolved plain or lemon gelatin in hot water with a little vinegar and sugar. Let it cool until syrupy, then folded in finely shredded cabbage, chopped celery, diced pimiento, and sometimes green pepper. Poured it into a mold and chilled it until firm. When you turned it out, you got a clear jewel-like salad with vegetables suspended throughout like a stained glass window. This was mid-century gelatin cookery at its most confident, a savory salad that treated Jell-O as a serious ingredient rather than a dessert. It had been around for decades, sold to homemakers as a modern, elegant way to serve a salad, and it held its place on ladies' luncheon tables and holiday spreads right through the era. The appeal was in the surprise, a cool, tangy, slightly sweet gelatin that gave way to the fresh crunch of cabbage and celery inside. It was refreshing and light, a palate cleanser dressed up as a centerpiece, pretty enough to earn its name. It could be made a day ahead and unmolded at the last minute, which suited a busy hostess. The trouble, of course, was that later generations balked at the very idea of vegetables suspended in wobbling gelatin. But to the cooks who loved it, that crunchy, tangy bite was a small marvel of the mold. Did the sight of shredded cabbage floating in clear gelatin strike you as elegant once? And does it now? Number 52. Glorified rice. Number 52 is the sweet, fluffy rice salad that Midwestern church basements made by the vat. You stirred cold, cooked rice together with crushed pineapple, mini marshmallows, and whipped cream or Cool Whip, sometimes with a handful of maraschino cherries or mandarin oranges folded in for color, then chilled it until the flavors settled and the marshmallows softened. It came out cool and creamy and sweet, a dish that called itself a salad but landed a lot closer to dessert. It was Lutheran potluck and church supper food, especially beloved across the upper Midwest, where it appeared at funerals, weddings, and Sunday dinners alike. The name says it all. Plain rice glorified into something festive with sweetness and cream, a thrifty way to turn leftover rice into a crowd-pleasing dish. The texture was the charm, the tender rice and the soft marshmallows, and the juicy pineapple, all folded into cool whipped cream, light and sweet and refreshing. It cost very little and fed a big gathering from one bowl, which made it a natural for feeding a whole congregation. It could be made the day before, which suited the busy schedule of a church kitchen. The knock was its sweetness, since calling it a salad stretched the word about as far as it would go, but cool and creamy on a warm day. It was a genuine comfort. Did glorified rice show up at every gathering in your community, sitting proudly on the salad table, even though everyone knew it was really dessert? Number 51. No-bake cookies. Number 51 is the chocolate oatmeal drop cookie that never saw the inside of an oven. You boiled sugar, butter, milk, and cocoa together on the stovetop, then stirred in peanut butter, vanilla, and quick oats, and dropped spoonfuls onto wax paper to set up as they cooled. No baking, no oven, just a pot and a spoon and a little patience. While they firmed, this was the cookie for a hot day, when nobody wanted to turn on the oven, and the cookie a child could make with just a bit of supervision at the stove. The stovetop method made them fast and forgiving, and the ingredients were pantry staples that most kitchens always had on hand. The flavor was rich and satisfying, chocolate and peanut butter bound together, with chewy oats, somewhere between a cookie and a piece of fudge. They cost almost nothing and made a big batch in minutes, which is why they filled bake sales, lunchboxes, and church potlucks all decade long. Every cook chased the same tricky balance, boiling the sugar mixture just long enough that the cookies set firm, but not so long that they turned dry and crumbly. Hit the timing right, and they came out glossy and chewy and perfect. They were the reliable treat you could whip up when company was coming and time was short. Do you remember dropping spoonfuls of that warm chocolate oat mixture onto wax paper and waiting impatiently for them to set? Number 50, cornbread dressing. Number 50, the halfway mark, is the Southern cornbread dressing that anchored every holiday feast. You crumbled day-old cornbread together with torn white bread, moistened it with turkey or chicken broth, and folded in sauteed onion and celery, a couple of beaten eggs, plenty of sage, and often chopped boiled egg or giblets. Then baked it in a big pan until the top browned and the inside stayed moist and savory. It was not the bread stuffing of the North cooked inside the bird, but a separate pan of cornbread dressing that the South claimed as its own. Cornbread was a daily bread in Southern kitchens, and turning the leftovers into holiday dressing was both thrifty and sacred, a recipe passed down mother to daughter with fierce pride. The flavor was deeply savory, all sage and onion and rich broth, soaked into tender cornbread, the taste of Thanksgiving itself for millions of families. It fed a huge table from one pan and could be assembled ahead, freeing the oven for the turkey. Every family guarded its exact recipe, arguing over how much sage, whether to add giblets, and just how moist the finished dressing should be. The one real risk was drying it out or soaking it too wet, a balance every cook learned by feel over years of holidays. Made right, it was moist, savory, and unforgettable. It was the dish that made a holiday taste like home. Did your family argue every single year about the right amount of sage in the cornbread dressing? Number 49. Marinated vegetable salad. Number 49 is the crisp, tangy vegetable salad that sat in the icebox soaking up flavor for a day. You cut up a mix of fresh vegetables, often broccoli, cauliflower, carrots, celery, and cherry tomatoes, poured over a zesty Italian-style dressing or a homemade sweet-sour marinade, and let the whole thing chill overnight so the raw vegetables drank up all that bright, herby dressing. By the next day, every bite was seasoned through and glossy. This was the make-ahead marvel that a hostess loved, a salad she could build the night before and pull out ready to serve. No last-minute fuss, with no lettuce to wilt and no mayonnaise to spoil. It held up beautifully on a hot buffet or a long potluck table, only getting better as the hours passed. The vegetables stayed crisp and fresh, but now they carried the tang of vinegar and the warmth of herbs and garlic in every crunchy bite. It was colorful and healthy seeming, a welcome fresh note among the heavier casseroles and creamy salads of the era. It cost little and fed a crowd, built from whatever vegetables were cheap and in season. There was almost nothing to complain about, though a heavy hand with the dressing could leave it swimming and oily. Drained and served cool, it was crunchy and bright and endlessly refreshing. By morning, the whole bowl glistened, every floret and slice slicked with that herby dressing, ready to carry straight to the table without another minute of work. Did a big bowl of marinated vegetables ever wait overnight in your refrigerator, getting better with every hour that passed? Number 48, deviled ham. Number 48 is the spicy, savory ham spread that filled sandwiches and topped crackers for decades. You ground cooked ham fine, then mixed it with mayonnaise, a little mustard, a shake of hot sauce or cayenne, and sometimes sweet pickle relish, mashing it into a smooth, zesty spread. You slathered it between bread for a quick lunch or served it on crackers at a party. The word deviled meant the addition of spice and heat, an old kitchen term for anything given a sharp, seasoned kick. And this spread earned the name. It came from a time when nothing went to waste, when the last of a holiday ham was ground up and seasoned into something new and useful. It was cheap and shelf-stable when made from the canned version, and it kept in the refrigerator for a quick meal whenever hunger struck. The flavor was rich and salty and sharp, the smoky ham brightened by mustard and heat, a bold little spread that turned plain bread into something with real character. It packed easily into lunchboxes and picnic baskets, and it dressed up a party tray with almost no effort. Some cooks kept it mild, others made it fiery, and every household set its own level of spice. The knock later on was that it was processed and salty, out of step with fresher tastes. But that zesty, savory bite was a small pleasure that fed a family cheaply and well. Do you remember a little spread like this turning yesterday's ham into today's lunch without a single scrap wasted? Number 47, fried green tomatoes. Number 47 is the tart, crispy slice. That put the summer's unripe tomatoes to delicious use. You sliced firm green tomatoes thick, dredged them in cornmeal seasoned with salt and pepper, and fried them in hot oil until the coating turned golden and crunchy, and the tomato inside went warm and tender. You ate them hot, and their tangy bite was unlike anything a ripe tomato could offer. Southern garden thrift never got cleverer than this, a way to use the green tomatoes that never got the chance to ripen before frost, or that the vine produced in stubborn excess. Rather than waste them, cooks turned them into a treat, coating their firm tartness in crisp cornmeal and frying them into something people craved. The flavor was a bright surprise, the tomato tangy and almost lemony under its crunchy golden crust, savory and tart at once. They came out of the skillet hot and crisp, and folks ate them as a side, a snack, or even tucked into a sandwich. It cost almost nothing, since the tomatoes came straight from the garden, and it rescued fruit that would otherwise have gone to the compost. The only real work was the frying, the hot oil, and the standing over the skillet turning each slice. But that first tart, crispy bite made it worth every minute. Have you ever bitten into a hot fried green tomato and been surprised by how good an unripe one could taste? Number 46. Cottage cheese and lime jello. Number 46 is the cool green salad that puzzled outsiders and delighted the faithful. You dissolved lime jello, let it start to thicken, then folded in cottage cheese, crushed pineapple, and sometimes chopped nuts or a little whipped topping, poured it into a dish or mold, and chilled it until set. The result was a pale green, creamy flecked gelatin salad that everyone in the family simply called the green stuff. This was potluck and holiday food across the Midwest and beyond, a dish that showed up so reliably it needed no formal name. The lime gelatin gave it a sweet tart brightness, while the cottage cheese added a creamy, savory tang and a curious texture that folks either loved or found deeply strange. The pineapple brought juicy sweetness, and the whole thing landed somewhere between salad, side, and dessert, refusing to be pinned down. It was cheap and fast, built from a box of Jell-O and a tub of cottage cheese, and it fed a crowd from one bowl. It could be made a day ahead and pulled out cold, which suited a busy holiday kitchen. The knock was obvious to anyone who did not grow up with it, since the marriage of gelatin and cottage cheese struck the uninitiated as bizarre. But to the families who loved it, that cool, creamy, sweet tart bite was pure comfort and pure tradition. Did your family have a name for the green stuff? And did anyone ever manage to explain to an outsider what was in it? Number 45. Sauerkraut salad. Number 45 is the tangy, crunchy slaw that traded mayonnaise for a sweet-sour marinade. You drained and rinsed sauerkraut, then tossed it with chopped celery, onion, green pepper, and sometimes shredded carrot, and poured over a dressing of vinegar, sugar, and oil, letting it marinate in the refrigerator for a day, so the flavors mellowed and married. It came out crisp and zippy. The sharp kraut softened into something bright and addictive. The dish carried German and Eastern European heritage, brought into Midwestern kitchens, where sauerkraut was a pantry staple and a point of pride. Cooks who wanted a change from creamy coleslaw turned to this tangy alternative, and it became a fixture at picnics, potlucks, and covered dish suppers. With no mayonnaise to spoil, it was safe on a hot table and only improved with time, making it a natural make-ahead dish. The flavor was bright and sweet-sour and refreshing. The fermented tang of the kraut mellowed by sugar and lifted by the crunch of fresh peppers and onion. It cost almost nothing, built from a cheap jar or bag of kraut and a few vegetables, and it fed a big crowd. It even kept for a week in the refrigerator, getting better each day. The only surprise for the uninitiated was the idea of sauerkraut in a cold salad rather than hot on a sausage. But one tangy, crunchy bite usually made a convert. Have you ever traded creamy slaw for a tangy sauerkraut salad and found yourself going back for more? Number 44. Au gratin potatoes. Number 44 is the bubbling, cheesy potato casserole that made a plain spud feel luxurious. You sliced potatoes thin, layered them in a buttered dish, and covered them in a rich cheese sauce made from butter, flour, milk, and plenty of shredded cheese. Then baked the whole thing until the potatoes turned tender and the top browned into a golden, crusty layer. Some cooks scattered breadcrumbs or extra cheese over the top for even more crunch. This was the fancy potato, of the holiday and Sunday table, the dish you made when scalloped potatoes needed to feel a little richer and more special. Potatoes were cheap and always on hand, and drowning them in cheese sauce turned a humble root into a decadent, company-worthy side. The flavor was deeply comforting, the tender slices of potato bound in a smooth, sharp cheese sauce, with that browned, bubbling top, giving a satisfying contrast. It fed a big table from one pan and paired with ham, roast, or turkey with equal ease. It took patience to build, slicing all those potatoes thin and layering them just right, and it needed a long, slow bake to turn tender all the way through. The knock was its richness, a decadent dish heavy with cheese and cream. But that first cheesy, golden-topped scoop was worth every calorie. Did the sight of bubbling, browned au gratin potatoes coming out of the oven ever make a plain Sunday dinner feel like a feast? Number 43. Hush Puppies. Number 43 is the crispy fried cornmeal ball that always came with the fish fry. You stirred cornmeal with a little flour, baking powder, salt, chopped onion, buttermilk, and an egg into a thick batter. Then drop spoonfuls into the same hot oil the fish had fried in, cooking them until they turned deep golden and crunchy outside and fluffy inside. You ate them hot, and they rarely made it to the table without a few going missing along the way. These little fried nuggets were born at Southern fish fries and fish camps, the humble companion to fried catfish, coleslaw, and sweet tea. The story goes that cooks fried up bits of cornmeal batter to quiet the barking dogs underfoot, tossing them a hush puppy, and the name stuck. The flavor was savory and satisfying, sweet cornmeal and sharp onion in a crisp golden shell, the perfect starchy bite to round out a plate of fried fish. They cost almost nothing, built from cornmeal and an onion, and they turned a fish fry into a feast. They came out of the oil hot and crackling, and everyone reached for them the moment they hit the paper. The only trick was frying them at the right temperature, so the inside cooked through before the outside burned. Done right, they were crispy, fluffy, and impossible to resist. They came off the paper in a steaming heap, and folks reached in before the cook could even set the basket down, burning their fingers and not caring one bit. Did the hush puppies ever disappear from your table faster than the fish they came with? Number 42. Caramel corn. Number 42 is the crunchy, buttery caramel popcorn that filled tins and gift bags every holiday season. You popped a big batch of corn, poured over a hot caramel of brown sugar, butter, and corn syrup, stirred until every kernel was coated, then baked it low and slow, stirring often, until the caramel turned crisp and each piece shattered instead of stuck. Some cooks folded in peanuts for a homemade version of the classic. Families made this in big batches at Christmas, packing it into tins and bags to give to neighbors, teachers, and relatives. Homemade caramel corn took real work, the kind of project that took over the kitchen for an afternoon and filled the whole house with the smell of toasting sugar. The reward was a light, crunchy popcorn coated in a crisp, buttery caramel that was sweet and toasty and dangerously easy to eat by the handful. It cost little, a bag of popcorn and some pantry sugar, yet it made a generous and beloved gift. The baking was the secret, since that low, slow oven time was what turned the caramel from sticky to crisp and kept the corn from turning chewy or soggy. Done right, it stayed crunchy for weeks in a tin. It was the taste of holiday giving made by hand with care. A single tin of it, tied with a ribbon and left on a porch, told a neighbor they had been thought of during the busiest, warmest weeks of the year. Do you remember receiving a tin of homemade caramel corn and knowing exactly how many hours someone had spent stirring it? Number 41. Sweet and sour red cabbage. Number 41 is the tangy braised cabbage that turned a humble head into a jewel-toned side. You shredded red cabbage and cooked it slowly with vinegar, a little sugar, chopped apple, and sometimes a bit of bacon or onion, simmering it until the cabbage turned tender and deep purple and soaked up all that sweet-sour flavor. The apple melted in and added natural sweetness, and the whole thing turned glossy and rich as it cooked down. This dish came from German and Northern European kitchens, carried into American homes, where it became the traditional partner to pork roast, sausage, and holiday goose or duck. The long, slow braise was its heart, coaxing the tough raw cabbage into something silky and deeply flavored, sweet and tart at once. The color alone made it special, a vivid ruby side that brightened a plate of brown and beige holiday food. It was cheap, built from a cheap head of cabbage and a few pantry staples, and it fed a crowd from one pot. It could be made ahead and reheated, and like many braised dishes, it tasted even better the next day. The only cost was time, since it needed a long simmer to reach that tender, glossy finish. But that sweet tart, jewel red cabbage was worth the wait, a bright and tangy foil to rich roasted meat. Did a pot of sweet and sour red cabbage ever fill your kitchen with the smell of vinegar and apples on a cold holiday afternoon? Number 40, quiche Lorraine. Number 40 is the savory egg tart that turned a dinner party sophisticated overnight. You lined a pie crust with crisp bacon and shredded Swiss cheese, poured over a custard of beaten eggs, cream, and a little nutmeg, and baked it until the filling puffed and set and the top turned golden. You served it in wedges, warm or at room temperature, and it worked for brunch, lunch, or a light supper. This was the height of fashionable home entertaining in the decade. The dish that signaled a hostess was keeping up with continental style. Quiche came out of French cooking, but it caught fire in American kitchens as an elegant, do-ahead centerpiece that felt fancy while being surprisingly forgiving to make. The flavor was rich and satisfying. The smoky bacon and nutty Swiss folded into a silky, savory custard, held in a flaky crust. It could be made ahead and served at any temperature, which made it a dream for luncheons and buffets. It stretched a few eggs and a little bacon into a dish that fed a table and looked impressive doing it. The knock came later, when quiche became a punchline about fussy, trendy food, unfairly dismissed as something less than hearty. But a good slice of quiche Lorraine was a genuinely wonderful thing, creamy and smoky and rich. It was the taste of a hostess, reaching for something a little more worldly. Did quiche once feel like the most sophisticated thing you could possibly serve to company? Number 39, creamed lima beans. Number 39 is the tender lima bean folded into a warm, buttery cream sauce. You simmered lima beans, fresh or frozen, until soft, then bound them in a simple white sauce of butter, flour, and milk, seasoning it plainly with salt and pepper, and sometimes a little chopped onion or a scrap of ham for depth. The beans turned soft and mild, and the cream sauce wrapped each one in a gentle richness. It was old-fashioned home cooking, a side that showed up at Sunday dinners and holiday tables across much of the country, where the humble lima bean got dressed up in cream to make it more inviting. Lima beans had a reputation as the vegetable children dreaded, but the cream sauce softened both their texture and their bad name, turning them into something comforting and easy to eat. The flavor was gentle and buttery, the earthy, starchy bean mellowed by the smooth, mild sauce, a quiet and homey side. It was cheap, built from a bag of dried or frozen beans and a little milk, and it stretched to feed a big table. It paired well with ham, chicken, and roast, a soft and creamy counterpoint to the meat. The knock was the lima bean itself, which never fully shook its unpopularity, and the richness of the sauce that later cooks trimmed away. But bathed in cream and butter, even a lima bean skeptic often came around. Did a warm bowl of creamed limas ever change your mind about a bean you were sure you disliked? Number 38, Coca-Cola salad. Number 38 is the dark, fizzy gelatin salad that turned a soft drink into a congealed dessert. You dissolved cherry jello in hot water, stirred in a bottle of Coca-Cola along with crushed pineapple, chopped cherries and pecans, and sometimes swirled in softened cream cheese, then chilled it in a mold until it set into a dark, jewel-toned salad. The cola gave it a deep color and a subtle caramel flavor that plain gelatin never had. This was a Southern potluck and holiday favorite, a fun and slightly novel gelatin salad that used the region's beloved soft drink as a star ingredient. It fit right into the era's love of congealed salads, adding a playful twist that made people curious and delighted at the same time. The flavor was sweet and fruity, with that faint cola tang underneath, the pineapple and cherries adding juicy bursts, and the pecans a welcome crunch. It was cheap and easy, built from a bottle of soap and a box of gelatin, and it fed a crowd from one mold. It could be made a day ahead and unmolded cold, which suited a busy church kitchen or holiday table. The one bit of showmanship was the unmolding, that anxious flip onto a plate that either succeeded gloriously or stuck stubbornly. When it slid out clean, it was a dark and glossy showpiece, Did a Coca-Cola salad ever sit on your holiday table and make guests ask, a little amazed, whether there was really soda pop in it? Number 37. Cheese grits. Number 37 is the rich, cheesy grits casserole that graced Southern brunch and holiday tables. You cooked grits until thick and creamy, then stirred in butter, sharp cheddar, or a roll of garlic cheese, beaten eggs and a shake of hot sauce, poured it into a dish, and baked it until it puffed and set with a golden top. What started as a humble breakfast porridge turned into a rich, savory casserole worthy of company. Few things say Southern comfort like this. Grits raised from an everyday breakfast into a holiday and brunch centerpiece, with the addition of cheese and eggs. Grits were cheap and foundational to the Southern table, and baking them with cheese turned a plain bowl into a dish people requested by name. The flavor was savory and rich, the creamy corn grits given body and sharpness by the cheese, with a little heat from the hot sauce cutting the richness. It fed a big table from one pan, and paired with ham, eggs, and biscuits at a holiday brunch. It could be assembled ahead and baked off in the morning, a real gift when feeding a house full of guests. The garlic cheese version, made with a specific roll of processed cheese, gave it a particular savory depth that people remembered fondly. The knock was its richness, heavy with butter and cheese, more indulgence than everyday fare. But that first cheesy, creamy scoop was pure Southern comfort. Did a pan of cheese grits ever turn your ordinary breakfast into something worth setting the good table for? Number 36. Salmon patties. Number 36 is the crispy salmon cake that stretched a can of fish into a whole family supper. You drained a can of pink salmon, flaked it, bones and all, mixed it with crushed crackers or cornmeal, a beaten egg, chopped onion, and a little seasoning. Shaped the mixture into patties and fried them in a hot skillet until they turned golden and crisp on both sides. You served them with a squeeze of lemon or a dollop of tartar sauce, often alongside creamed peas and mashed potatoes. This was thrifty weeknight cooking, a way to put a protein on the table cheaply on a Friday or any night. The budget was tight. Canned salmon was affordable and shelf-stable, always waiting in the pantry, and it turned into a hot, satisfying meal in minutes. The flavor was savory and rich, the salmon crisped at the edges and tender inside, brightened by onion and lemon, a homey and filling supper. The soft bones in the can mashed right in, adding a quiet dose of calcium that folks did not even think about. It was cheap enough for the leanest week, and good enough that children happily ate their fish. Every family had its own binder and seasoning, and the patties came out a little different in every kitchen. The only caution was keeping the patties from falling apart in the pan, a matter of the right amount of egg and cracker. Fried up crisp, they were a humble Friday night favorite. Did salmon patties show up on your family's table every Friday like clockwork? Number 35. Watermelon rind pickles. Number 35 is the sweet, spiced pickle made from the part of the melon most people threw away. You peeled and cubed the firm white rind of a watermelon, soaked it, then simmered it in a syrup of sugar, vinegar, cinnamon, and cloves until it turned translucent and tender, and sealed it into jars to keep. What looked like garbage became a jewel-like, sweet and spicy pickle that sparkled on the relish tray. Old-fashioned Southern thrift never got more ingenious, a flat refusal to waste even the rind of a summer watermelon. In a time when nothing edible was discarded, cooks turned that thick white rind into a prized preserve, canning jars of it to enjoy long after melon season had passed. The flavor was a surprise, sweet and syrupy with the warmth of cinnamon and clove. The rind turned tender and almost candied, but with a pleasant firmness. It brightened a holiday relish tray and made a lovely homemade gift, a small proof of a cook's care and cleverness. It cost almost nothing, made from a part of the fruit others tossed, yet it took real time and patience to prepare and put up. The long process of soaking, simmering, and canning is exactly why it faded, as convenience took over the kitchen. But a jar of watermelon rind pickles was a treasure, sweet and spiced and unexpected. Did anyone in your family make pickles out of watermelon rind and leave you amazed that the part you spit out could taste so good? Number 34. Homemade granola. Number 34 is the toasty, crunchy cereal that came out of the era's Back to the Land spirit. You tossed rolled oats with chopped nuts, seeds, and shredded coconut, coated it all in honey and oil, and baked it slowly, stirring now and then, until it turned golden and toasty. then folded in raisins or dried fruit once it cooled. You ate it with milk or yogurt, or by the handful straight from the jar. This was the taste of the health food movement that swept the decade, when a whole generation grew curious about natural, wholesome, homemade food, and turned away from the boxed and processed. Making granola at home was part of that spirit, a wholesome project that filled the kitchen with the smell of toasting oats and honey. The flavor was nutty and toasty and lightly sweet. The crunchy clusters of oats and nuts balanced by chewy fruit, hearty and satisfying in a way that store cereal was not. It could be made in big batches and stored for weeks, a thrifty and healthy staple for breakfast or snacking. Every cook tuned it to taste, more honey or less, this nut or that seed, making it endlessly personal. The one caution was the baking, since honey and oats could scorch fast if the oven ran too hot or you forgot to stir. Toasted gently, though, it was golden and crunchy and good. Did homemade granola show up in your kitchen when the whole world suddenly got interested in natural, wholesome food? Number 33. Fudge. Number 33 is the rich chocolate fudge that no holiday season was complete without. You boiled sugar, butter, evaporated milk, and chocolate together to just the right temperature, then beat in marshmallow cream, vanilla, and chopped nuts, and poured it into a pan to set into dense, glossy squares. Cutting into that firm, creamy fudge and getting a clean square was the reward for all the careful stirring. No homemade holiday candy was more beloved, the treat that families made every December to give away in tins and set out for company. Making good fudge was a point of pride and a bit of a science, a matter of getting the sugar to just the right stage, so the finished candy came out creamy and smooth, instead of grainy or soft. The flavor was deeply chocolatey and rich, sweet and dense, the nuts adding crunch to the melting smoothness. It was the kind of thing a woman was known for, her fudge requested by name at every gathering. It cost little, built from sugar and chocolate and a jar of marshmallow cream, yet it made a generous and treasured gift. The whole batch lived or died on the cooking, since a degree too hot or a moment too long could ruin the texture entirely. Made right, it was velvety and perfect, melting on the tongue. Cut into small squares and stacked on a plate under wax paper, it disappeared piece by piece all through the season, no matter how big a batch you started with. Did someone in your family make fudge every Christmas that everyone secretly hoped to get a piece of? Number 32. Duchess potatoes. Number 32 is the elegant piped potato that dressed up a plate for a special dinner. You mashed potatoes until smooth, enriched them with butter, egg yolks, and a little cream and nutmeg, then spooned the mixture into a piping bag and squeezed out pretty swirled rosettes onto a baking sheet, brushing them with butter and baking them until the ridged edges turned golden and crisp. Each little swirl came out fancy and browned, a potato that looked like it belonged in a restaurant. This was the showpiece potato of the era, the side a hostess made when a plain scoop of mashed would not do. For a holiday or a company dinner, piping the potatoes into elegant shapes turned an everyday mash into something worthy of the good china and the fine tablecloth. The flavor was rich and buttery, the egg yolks giving the potato a golden color and a smooth, luxurious body, with crisp brown edges on each swirl. They could be piped ahead and baked at the last minute, which made them useful for entertaining. They stretched a few potatoes into a dish that looked like real effort, impressing guests without costing much. The work was in the piping, a fussy step that took a steady hand and a pastry bag, which is exactly why they slipped away as kitchens got busier. But those golden little swirls made a holiday plate look special. Did a plate ringed with piped Duchess potatoes ever make a holiday dinner feel like something out of a fine restaurant? Number 31. Corn relish. Number 31 is the sweet, tangy corn relish that brightened a plate and put up the summer harvest. You cooked corn kernels with chopped bell pepper, onion, and celery in a sweet-sour brine of vinegar, sugar, and mustard seed, simmered it until the flavors married, and sealed it into jars, sometimes calling the whole colorful mix chow chow. It kept for months on the pantry shelf, a jar of summer waiting for a winter meal. It belonged to canning season, the work families did in late summer, when the garden overflowed and nothing could be allowed to go to waste. Putting up jars of corn relish was both thrift and tradition, a way to carry the taste of the garden clear through to spring. The flavor was bright and tangy and a little sweet, the crunchy corn and peppers snapping against the sharp, mustardy brine. a lively condiment that woke up whatever it touched. It topped beans, dressed up a plain plate of meat, and rode along on a hot dog, adding crunch and zip wherever it went. It cost almost nothing, built from the garden's excess. Yet the canning took real time and effort. A hot afternoon of chopping and simmering and sealing jars. That labor is why fewer people put it up, as store shelves filled with cheaper convenience. But a homemade jar of corn relish was a small treasure. Did your family put up jars of corn relish or chow chow every summer to brighten the plainer meals of winter? Number 30. Baked beans. Number 30 is the sweet, smoky pot of baked beans that anchored every cookout and church supper. You doctored canned beans, or started from scratch with navy beans, then folded in brown sugar, molasses, mustard, ketchup, chopped onion and strips of bacon, and baked the whole thing slowly until the sauce thickened and darkened, and the top caramelized. The long, low bake turned a simple can of beans into something deep and rich. This was the dependable partner to barbecue, hot dogs, and fried chicken, the big pan that showed up at every summer gathering and potluck. Nearly every cook started from a can and made it their own, which is why no two pots of baked beans ever tasted quite the same. The flavor was sweet and smoky and tangy all at once, the beans tender and saucy, the bacon lending salt and smoke, the molasses giving a deep, dark sweetness. It was cheap and stretched to feed a crowd, and it only got better as it sat, and the flavors melded. It could be made ahead and reheated, a real help when feeding a big group. Every family guarded its own doctoring, more mustard here, more brown sugar there, a secret splash of something in the pot. The one caution was balancing the sweetness, so the beans did not tip into cloying. Done right, they were rich and savory and irresistible. Did your family have a secret ingredient that turned an ordinary can of beans into the pot everyone asked about? Number 29. Spiced nuts. Number 29 is the sweet and spicy candied nut that filled little dishes at every holiday party. You beat an egg white until frothy, tossed pecans or walnuts in it, coated them in a mix of sugar, cinnamon, and a pinch of salt, then baked them low and slow until the coating turned crisp and the nuts toasted through. The kitchen filled with the smell of cinnamon and toasting nuts, and the finished batch came out crunchy and sweet and warmly spiced. It was holiday and party food. The little bowls set out on the coffee table for guests to nibble alongside their drinks. Homemade spiced nuts were a small luxury, a treat that felt festive and special without costing much, and they made a lovely gift bagged up with a ribbon. The flavor was rich and toasty and sweet, the cinnamon sugar shell crackling to give way to the buttery crunch of the nut inside. They could be made ahead and stored for weeks, always ready when company dropped by. They filled a candy dish, dressed up a party spread, and disappeared by the handful. The care was in the baking, a low and patient oven that toasted the nuts and set the coating without scorching either. Some cooks made them savory with cayenne and Worcestershire instead of sweet, and both versions had their devotees. Warm from the oven or cool from the jar, they were impossible to walk past. Did a little dish of spiced nuts sit on your holiday coffee table, refilled again and again as the party wore on? Number 28. Zucchini boats. Number 28 is the stuffed and baked zucchini that made a meal out of the garden's overflow. You halved zucchini lengthwise, scooped out the centers, and filled the hollows with a savory mixture of the chopped flesh, breadcrumbs, onion, tomato, cheese, and sometimes browned sausage or ground beef. Then baked them until the zucchini turned tender and the filling browned on top. Each boat came out as its own little stuffed vegetable, hearty enough to be a side or a light main. This was garden cooking, born of necessity, the answer to zucchini plants that produced far more than any family could eat. When the squash grew faster than anyone could keep up with, cooks hollowed them out and stuffed them to turn the glut into something worth serving. The flavor was savory and satisfying, the mild zucchini shell holding a rich, cheesy, well-seasoned filling that made the vegetable feel like a real dish. It stretched a little meat and a lot of squash into a filling meal, thrifty and clever at once. It could be filled ahead and baked when needed, and it made a pretty presentation on the table. The work was in the hollowing and stuffing, a bit more effort than simply slicing and frying, but it solved the eternal summer problem of too much zucchini in a way that people actually enjoy. Did your garden ever grow so much zucchini that you found yourself stuffing and baking them just to keep up? Number 27. Divinity. Number 27 is the light, cloud-like candy that tested every cook's patience and skill. You boiled sugar, corn syrup, and water to the hardball stage, then beat the hot syrup into stiffly whipped egg whites, adding vanilla and chopped nuts, and dropped spoonfuls onto wax paper to set into soft, snowy white mounds. When it came out right, Divinity was airy and melt-in-your-mouth tender, almost like a sweet cloud. It was old-fashioned holiday candy, a Southern Christmas tradition that separated the confident cooks from the timid ones. Making Divinity was famously tricky, a real test of technique that could humble even an experienced hand, which gave it a certain prestige when it turned out well. The flavor was pure sweetness, sugar and vanilla whipped into something impossibly light, the nuts adding a welcome crunch to the soft, fluffy candy. It made a beautiful gift, and a lovely addition to a Christmas candy plate, snowy and elegant among the fudge and the brittle. The great enemy was humidity, since Divinity simply refused to set on a damp or rainy day, weeping and staying sticky, no matter how carefully you worked. On a dry, clear day, though, with the syrup cooked to just the right temperature and the beating done just long enough, it set into perfect airy peaks. That difficulty is exactly why fewer people make it now. A plate of it, snowy white and dotted with pecans, sat among the darker candies at Christmas like a little drift of fresh snow. Did someone in your family only attempt Divinity on a dry day, knowing the weather could ruin the whole batch? Number 26. Green Goddess. Number 26 is the herby, creamy green dressing that made salads and dips feel fresh and fashionable. You blended mayonnaise and sour cream with anchovy, fresh parsley, chives, tarragon, lemon, and garlic into a pale green, herb-flecked dressing, then poured it over crisp lettuce, or set it out as a dip for raw vegetables and chips. Its lush green color and bright herb flavor set it apart from the bottled dressings of the day. This was a stylish dressing that enjoyed real popularity in the era, a fresh and herbaceous alternative that felt a little more sophisticated than plain ranch or Italian. The generous herbs and the hit of anchovy gave it a savory depth and a tang that woke up whatever it touched. The flavor was creamy and bright and grassy, the fresh parsley and tarragon singing against the rich base, with the anchovy adding a savory backbone most people could not quite place. It dressed a wedge of crisp lettuce, coated a chilled chicken salad, or served as a dip for a platter of raw vegetables at a party. It cost little more than a handful of herbs and a few pantry staples, yet it tasted fresh and special. It leaned on fresh herbs, which not every kitchen kept on hand, and that is part of why the bottled versions never quite matched the homemade. But whipped up fresh, it was a vivid, herby delight. Did Green Goddess dressing ever make a plain salad feel suddenly stylish at your table? Number 25. Wild Rice Casserole. Number 25 is the nutty, savory rice bake that felt earthy and special all at once. You cooked wild rice until tender, folded it with sauteed mushrooms, onion, and celery, bound it with a little broth or cream soup, and sometimes added slivered almonds or bits of sausage. Then baked it until it set into a hearty, savory casserole. The wild rice gave it a chewy texture and a deep, nutty flavor that plain white rice could never offer. It was a special occasion side, particularly in the northern states, where wild rice grew in the lakes and marshes and carried real regional pride. Serving wild rice felt a little fancy and a little rooted at the same time, an earthy grain dressed up for a holiday or a company dinner. The flavor was rich and nutty and savory, the chewy grains playing against the tender mushrooms and the creamy binding, hearty and warming on a cold night. It fed a big table from one pan and paired beautifully with roast poultry or game. It could be assembled ahead and baked off when guests arrived, a real convenience for entertaining. Wild rice cost more than the everyday kind, which is part of what made it feel special and reserved for occasions. The one caution was cooking the wild rice fully, since undercooked grains stayed stubbornly tough. Cooked through and baked with care, it was earthy and elegant. Did a wild rice casserole show up at your holiday table as the fancy, special grain nobody ate on ordinary nights? Number 24. Classic Potato Salad. Number 24 is the creamy, mustard-kissed potato salad that no picnic could do without. You boiled potatoes until tender, cut them into chunks, and folded them with mayonnaise, yellow mustard, chopped celery, onion, sweet pickle relish, and slices of hard-boiled egg, seasoning it with salt, pepper, and a dusting of paprika on top. You chilled it well, and it turned into the cool, creamy, tangy bowl that anchored every summer table. This was the definitive cookout side, the one dish everyone expected and someone always brought. From 4th of July picnics to church homecomings, potatoes were cheap and filling, and a big pot of them turned into a mountain of salad for a crowd at almost no cost. The flavor was rich and tangy and satisfying. The tender potatoes and creamy dressing, brightened by mustard and relish, with the egg adding richness and the celery, a welcome crunch. Every family had its own version, some sweet, some sharp, some loaded with egg, and folks were fiercely loyal to the one they grew up with. It traveled well and fed a multitude, which made it the reliable backbone of any gathering. The one rule everyone knew was to keep it cold, since mayonnaise in the summer sun was a genuine danger. Kept on ice and served cool, it was a summer institution. It rode to every gathering in the same big bowl, with the same worn serving spoon, and folks often knew whose it was before they ever took a bite. Did your family's potato salad taste so specific that you could pick it out blindfolded among a dozen others at the picnic? Number 23. Party Rye Pizzas. Number 23 is the little open-faced snack that turned cocktail rye into a hot appetizer. You browned ground beef or sausage together with a block of Velveeta until it melted into a savory, cheesy spread. Seasoned it with a little garlic and Worcestershire, then spooned it onto small slices of party rye bread and baked or broiled them until they bubbled and browned. You served them hot off the tray, and they vanished in a hurry. These little rye pizzas were the workhorse appetizer of holiday parties and game days, the hot bite that filled a platter and pleased everyone in the room. The cheesy meat mixture could be made ahead and even frozen on the bread, ready to bake off the moment guests arrived, which made them a favorite for busy hosts. The flavor was savory and rich, the seasoned meat and melted cheese piled on the hearty, slightly sour rye, a warm and satisfying two-bite snack. They cost little, built from ground meat and a block of processed cheese, yet they fed a crowd generously. They were sturdy and reliable, holding their shape and their heat on a buffet table. The one knock was that they leaned heavily on processed cheese, which the fresher-minded cooks later set aside. But hot from the oven, those little rye pizzas were the first thing gone from the spread. Did a tray of hot, cheesy rye pizzas ever come out at a party and disappear before you got your second one? Number 22. Mashed rutabaga. Number 22 is the humble mashed root that carried old country flavor to the holiday table. You peeled and cubed the tough golden rutabaga, boiled it until soft, then mashed it with butter, a little cream, salt, and pepper, sometimes with a mashed potato or two, folded in to smooth it out. The rutabaga cooked down into a golden, slightly sweet, earthy mash that was denser and more flavorful than potato alone. It was a traditional side in Scandinavian and Northern European homes, carried to America by immigrant families, and set on the holiday table beside the ham or the roast. In many households, the mashed rutabaga was as fixed to the feast as the potatoes, a quiet tradition handed down through the generations. The flavor was earthy and gently sweet, richer and more robust than a plain potato, mellowed by butter into something warm and comforting. It was cheap, since the rutabaga was one of the least expensive vegetables in the market, and it stretched to feed a big table. It paired naturally with the heavy, savory dishes of a holiday meal, adding a sweet, earthy note among them. The tough raw rutabaga took real muscle to peel and cube, a genuine chore that pushed it aside as convenience took over. But that golden, buttery mash was a beloved tradition in the homes that kept it, golden and buttery in its own dish. It sat quietly beside the flashier sides, but the people who grew up with it looked for it first at every holiday meal. Did mashed rutabaga hold a permanent place on your family's holiday table, right there beside the potatoes? Number 21. Oyster dressing. Number 21 is the rich, briny stuffing that made a holiday feel truly special along the coast. You made a bread or cornbread dressing base with onion, celery, and herbs, then folded in fresh oysters and a little of their liquor, and baked it until the top browned and the oysters plumped, and mingled their briny flavor all through the dish. The oysters gave the dressing a deep, savory richness, and a taste of the sea that a plain dressing never had. This was a holiday tradition rooted in the coastal South and the Chesapeake and Gulf regions, where oysters were plentiful and affordable, and a natural addition to the Thanksgiving and Christmas table. Adding oysters to the dressing was a way to make the feast feel abundant and celebratory, a special touch reserved for the biggest days of the year. The flavor was savory and briny and rich. The tender oysters folded through the herby, moist dressing, each bite carrying a little taste of the coast. It fed a big table from one pan and stood proudly beside the turkey. It could be assembled and baked on the day, filling the kitchen with a savory, briny aroma. The oysters made it a splurge and an acquired taste, and the dish faded inland where fresh oysters were harder to come by. But along the coast, oyster dressing was the taste of the holidays themselves. Did oyster dressing appear on your holiday table only in the years when fresh oysters were good and plentiful? Number 20. Buckeyes. Number 20 is the peanut butter ball dipped in chocolate to look like the nut of the Ohio Buckeye tree. You mixed peanut butter with butter, powdered sugar, and vanilla into a stiff dough, rolled it into balls, chilled them, then dipped each one partway into melted chocolate, leaving a circle of peanut butter showing on top, so it looked just like a Buckeye nut. You set them on wax paper to firm up and stored them cold. Ohio and the Midwest treasured this homemade holiday candy, where the Buckeye tree gave the treat its name and a little regional pride. Making them was a favorite family project, the kind of afternoon where the children rolled the balls and dipped them while somebody kept the chocolate warm. The flavor was the irresistible pairing of sweet, salty peanut butter and rich chocolate, the firm peanut butter center giving way under a snap of chocolate shell. They filled Christmas candy plates and gift tins, a treat that felt festive and looked charming with that signature peanut butter eye on top. They cost little, built from peanut butter and powdered sugar and a bit of chocolate, yet they made a generous and beloved gift. The only fuss was the dipping, that careful moment of lowering each ball into the chocolate and leaving just the right circle showing. Done with care, they looked like a whole bowl of little Buckeye nuts. Did rolling and dipping Buckeyes count as one of your family's holiday traditions every December? Number 19. Spoon bread. Number 19 is the soft, souffle-like cornbread you served with a spoon instead of slicing. You cooked cornmeal into a mush, stirred in butter, milk, and egg yolks, then folded in stiffly beaten egg whites to lighten it, poured it into a dish, and baked it until it puffed and set with a golden top and a soft, pudding-like center, too tender to cut into squares. It had to be scooped and served warm right from the dish. This was an old Southern specialty, a refined cousin of cornbread that landed somewhere between a bread, a pudding, and a souffle. Serving spoon bread was a small mark of a good Southern cook, a dish that took a little more care than plain cornbread and rewarded it with something elegant and comforting. The flavor was gently sweet and rich with corn and butter, the texture soft and custardy, warm and light on the tongue. It appeared at Sunday dinners and holiday tables, a tender counterpoint to fried chicken, ham, or greens. It stretched humble cornmeal into something that felt special, cheap ingredients raised up with a little technique. The beaten egg whites were the secret and the challenge, since folding them in gently was what gave the spoon bread its lift, and a heavy hand meant a dense, flat result. Baked light and puffed, though, it was a soft, golden comfort. Have you ever eaten a cornbread so soft and tender that the only way to serve it was with a spoon? Number 18. Shrimp cocktail. Number 18 is the chilled shrimp fanned around a bowl of tangy red sauce that meant the evening was special. You boiled shrimp until just pink, chilled them well, then hung them around the rim of a footed glass filled with a cocktail sauce of ketchup, horseradish, lemon, and a shake of hot sauce. You set it out as a first course or an appetizer, and it instantly signaled that this was a nicer occasion than an ordinary supper. It marked the height of festive entertaining, the dish a host served on New Year's Eve, an anniversary, or a holiday to make guests feel pampered. Shrimp was a splurge, a treat not eaten every day, so a shrimp cocktail carried an air of celebration and generosity the moment it appeared. The flavor was cool and clean and bright, the sweet, snappy shrimp meeting the sharp, horseradish-spiked sauce in a bite that woke up the whole mouth. It looked elegant, all those pink shrimp arranged just so around the ruby sauce, a small piece of showmanship at the start of a meal. It took little cooking, just boiling and chilling, though the shrimp itself made it a costly treat. That expense is exactly why it was reserved for special nights, rather than everyday tables. But that first cold, spicy bite told everyone the celebration had begun. Set out in a footed glass with the shrimp hung around the rim, it caught the light and told everyone at the table that no expense had been spared tonight. Did the sight of a shrimp cocktail ever tell you, as a child, that tonight was a truly special occasion? Number 17. Cauliflower with cheese sauce. Number 17 is the tender cauliflower drowned in a warm, sharp cheese sauce. You steamed or boiled cauliflower until just tender, then draped it in a smooth cheese sauce built from butter, flour, milk, and plenty of sharp cheddar, sometimes finishing it under the broiler with buttered breadcrumbs on top for a browned, crunchy crust. The mild cauliflower disappeared into that rich, cheesy blanket, and even the vegetable wary happily ate their fill. This was a common family and holiday side, a way to make a plain vegetable inviting by covering it in the cheese sauce that home cooks of the era loved so well. Cauliflower on its own was mild and easy to ignore, but under a good cheese sauce, it became a dish people actually reached for. The flavor was rich and savory, the soft cauliflower carrying the sharp, creamy sauce, comforting and satisfying in a way plain steamed cauliflower never was. It fed a big table and dressed up a holiday plate, adding a warm, cheesy note among the other sides. It was cheap, built from a head of cauliflower and a little cheese and milk, and it turned a humble vegetable into a treat. The one knock was the richness, since the cheese sauce added plenty of butter and cheese to an otherwise light vegetable. But a warm dish of cauliflower under cheese sauce was pure comfort, and it got the whole table to eat their vegetables. Did a good cheese sauce ever turn a vegetable you disliked into something you actually looked forward to? Number 16. Magic Cookie Bars. Number 16 is the layered dessert bar that built itself right in the pan with almost no effort. You pressed a graham cracker crumb crust into a pan, then layered on chocolate chips, butterscotch chips, shredded coconut, and chopped nuts, poured a can of sweetened condensed milk over the whole thing, and baked it until it set into gooey, golden bars. Folks called them magic bars or 7-layer bars or Hello Dolly bars. And the magic was that you just stacked the layers and let the oven do the rest. It was the ultimate easy dessert. The bar a busy cook made for a bake sale, a potluck, or a lunchbox with no mixing bowl and no fuss at all. Everything went into one pan in layers, and the sweetened condensed milk bound it all together as it baked into something rich and chewy. The flavor was decadent and sweet, chocolate and butterscotch and coconut and nuts all held in that caramelized condensed milk, a rich bite that satisfied any sweet tooth. It cost little, built from pantry staples and a can of milk, yet it made a generous pan that fed a crowd. It could be arranged in big squares or small, stretching to serve as many as you needed. The one caution was letting them cool fully before cutting, since warm bars fell apart in a gooey mess. Cooled and cut, they were chewy, golden perfection. Did the layers of a magic cookie bar seem like actual magic to you, as a child watching them come together? Number 15. Skillet Fried Corn. Number 15 is the buttery, milky skillet corn that tasted like the peak of summer. You cut fresh corn off the cob, scraping the cobs to catch every drop of the milky juice, then cooked it all down in a hot skillet with butter, a splash of cream or milk, and salt and pepper, until it turned rich and creamy and just a little browned at the edges. The scraped corn milk thickened the whole thing into something far richer than plain kernels. This was true garden cooking, a southern and country favorite, made only when fresh sweet corn was in season and at its sweetest. Cutting and scraping the cobs was the whole secret, since that starchy corn milk was what gave the dish its creamy body without a drop of added flour. The flavor was sweet and buttery and rich, the tender corn kernels bound in their own creamy juice, a taste of summer that no can or freezer bag could match. It cost almost nothing when the corn came from the garden or the roadside stand, yet it tasted like a small luxury. It came together fast in a single skillet, a quick side for a summer supper of tomatoes and cornbread. The one requirement was truly fresh corn, since the dish lived or died on the sweetness and the milk of just picked ears. At the height of the season, it was pure gold. Did your family only make skillet-fried corn in the few short weeks when the sweet corn was truly at its best? Number 14. Bread and butter pickles. Number 14 is the sweet, crinkle-cut pickle that families put up by the jarful every summer. You sliced cucumbers and onions thin, salted them to draw out the water, then simmered them briefly in a syrupy brine of vinegar, sugar, mustard seed, celery seed, and turmeric before sealing them into jars. The turmeric gave them a golden glow, and the brine made them sweet and tangy at once. These homemade pickles were a canning season tradition, the work families did when the cucumber vines were overflowing, and the garden had to be put up for winter. Making bread and butter pickles was both thrift and ritual, a hot afternoon of slicing and simmering and sealing that filled the pantry with jars of summer. The flavor was sweet and tangy and a little spiced, the crisp cucumber and onion swimming in that golden, syrupy brine, a bright bite that woke up any plate. They dressed up a sandwich, rode along on a relish tray, and brightened a plain supper all winter long. They cost almost nothing, built from garden cucumbers and pantry spices, yet a jar made a treasured homemade gift. The work of canning is exactly why fewer people put them up, as the jars grew cheap on the store shelf. But a homemade bread and butter pickle, crisp and sweet, was far better than anything bought. Did your family put up jars of bread and butter pickles every summer to last clear through the winter? Number 13. Stuffed celery. Number 13 is the crisp celery stick filled with a savory spread, the humble appetizer at every gathering. You washed and trimmed celery stalks, then filled the grooves with softened cream cheese, pimiento cheese, or a seasoned cheese spread, sometimes sprinkling paprika or chopped nuts over the top, and arranged the filled sticks on a platter. Cheap, crunchy, and easy, it was the reliable bite that rounded out any relish tray. It was a fixture of holiday spreads and party trays, the fresh, crisp counterpoint to all the rich dips and cheese balls. Celery was cheap and always available, and filling, it turned a plain vegetable into a proper appetizer, with almost no effort or expense. The pleasure was in the contrast, the cool crunch of the fresh celery against the soft, tangy, savory filling, a light and refreshing bite among heavier party foods. It appeared on the relish tray at Thanksgiving and Christmas, alongside the olives and the pickles, a fresh green note on a crowded table. It cost next to nothing, and could be filled ahead and chilled until the guests arrived. Every cook had a favorite filling, from plain cream cheese to sharp pimiento to a peanut butter version for the children. There was little to fault beyond the fact that it was as simple as appetizers came, but that crisp, creamy bite was a welcome fresh moment at any feast. Did stuffed celery always have a spot on your family's holiday relish tray, right next to the olives? Number 12. Monster cookies. Number 12 is the enormous, loaded cookie that threw everything good into one dough. You mixed peanut butter and oats with sugar and butter, then folded in chocolate chips and a big handful of colorful candy-coated chocolates, and dropped huge spoonfuls onto the sheet to bake into giant, chewy cookies studded with color. Often the recipe used no flour at all, held together instead by the peanut butter and oats, and it made an enormous batch. This was the fun, kid-pleasing cookie of the era, the one loaded with every treat at once, and baked big enough to feel like a real prize. The name fit, since these were monster cookies in size, and in the sheer amount of good stuff crammed into every one. The flavor was rich and chewy and sweet, the peanut butter and oats grounding the bursts of chocolate chip and candy, a cookie that delivered on every bite. They filled bake sales and lunchboxes and cookie jars, a generous treat that made a huge batch to share. They cost a little more with all those add-ins, but they made enough cookies to feed a whole classroom or a church crowd. The one caution was baking them through without drying them out, since a big cookie needed the right time to stay chewy in the middle. Baked just right, they were soft, colorful, and irresistible. Did a monster cookie loaded with candy feel like winning the lottery when you found one in your lunchbox? Number 11. Baked macaroni and cheese. Number 11 is the true baked macaroni and cheese, the crown of every Southern Sunday table. You cooked elbow macaroni, folded it into a rich custard of eggs, milk, and mountains of shredded sharp cheddar, poured it into a buttered dish, topped it with even more cheese, and baked it until the top browned and the inside set into something between a casserole and a souffle. It was not the boxed kind stirred on the stovetop, but a real baked dish, layered in custardy and served in squares. This was Sunday dinner and holiday food, a Southern staple that many families treated with real reverence. A dish the best cook in the family was trusted to make, baking it with eggs and cheese into a firm, sliceable casserole set it far above the quick stovetop version, turning macaroni and cheese into a proper occasion dish. The flavor was deeply cheesy and rich, the tender macaroni bound in a savory custard, with a browned, crusty top giving way to a creamy center. It fed a big table from one pan and stood proudly beside the ham, the greens, and the fried chicken. It could be assembled ahead and baked off for the meal, a reliable centerpiece for a crowd. Every family had its own blend of cheeses and its own secret to the custard, and the recipe was often guarded closely. The one requirement was plenty of good sharp cheese, since a stingy hand made a bland dish. Made with love and enough cheddar, it was unforgettable. Did one particular person in your family always make the baked macaroni and cheese because no one else could match it? Number 10. Dilly casserole bread. Number 10 is the soft, savory batter bread that filled a kitchen with the smell of dill and onion. You mixed a yeast batter enriched with cottage cheese, a beaten egg, dried onion, and plenty of dill. Let it rise in the bowl, then spooned it into a round casserole dish. Let it rise again, and baked it into a domed, golden loaf brushed with butter and sprinkled with salt. Because it was a batter bread, there was no kneading, just mixing and rising and baking. This bread earned real fame after winning a national baking contest, and it spread from that spotlight into home kitchens across the country through the decade. The cottage cheese was the surprise, giving the bread a moist, tender crumb and a subtle tang, while the dill and onion made it savory and aromatic. The flavor was soft and rich and herby, the tender crumb carrying the warmth of dill and onion, wonderful sliced, warm, and spread with butter. It came together without the work of kneading, which made it approachable even for a nervous baker. It filled the house with an inviting smell as it baked and made a homey, impressive loaf to serve with soup or supper. It cost little, built from pantry staples and a carton of cottage cheese, yet it tasted like something special. The one requirement was patience for the two risings, since the yeast needed its time. Given that time, it baked into a golden, savory round. Did the smell of a dill and onion bread baking ever pull your whole family into the kitchen to wait for the first warm slice? Number 9. Peanut brittle. Number 9 is the glassy golden candy that shattered into buttery, nutty shards. You boiled sugar, corn syrup, and water until it turned amber, stirred in raw peanuts, and let them toast in the hot syrup, then quickly beat in butter, vanilla, and a spoonful of baking soda that made the whole thing foam up light and airy, before you poured it thin onto a buttered sheet to cool and set. Once hard, you cracked it into rough, glassy pieces. This was a treasured homemade holiday candy, a Christmas tradition that families made in big batches to give away and set out for company. Good brittle took confidence in timing, a real test of a candy maker's skill in reading the hot syrup and working fast before it set. The baking soda was the secret, foaming the syrup so the brittle turned light and crisp instead of dense and tooth-cracking hard. The flavor was rich and buttery and toasty, the caramelized sugar snapping to release the roasted crunch of the peanuts, sweet and salty at once. It filled candy tins and gift bags, a generous treat that made a beloved present. It cost little, built from sugar and peanuts, yet it took real care to make well. The great enemy was the timing and the heat, since a moment too long turned the sugar bitter, and a moment too short left it soft. Poured and cracked at just the right instant, it was glassy, golden perfection. Did someone in your family make peanut brittle every Christmas that you could hear cracking from across the room? Number 8. Pickled beets and eggs. Number 8 is the ruby-stained pickle that turned humble eggs a startling shade of pink. You simmered beets in a sweet-sour brine of vinegar, sugar, and spices, then dropped peeled hard-boiled eggs right into the jar with them and let the whole thing sit in the refrigerator for days, while the eggs soaked up the tangy brine and turned a deep magenta all the way through. Sliced open, a pickled egg showed a bright white ring fading to a golden yolk inside a shocking pink shell. Pennsylvania Dutch cooking claimed this one proudly, a dish that filled the 7 sweets and sours of a traditional table and packed the relish tray at every gathering. Pickling the beets and eggs together was thrift and preservation, a way to keep both foods and stretch them into a tangy, colorful treat. The flavor was sweet and sour and earthy, the firm pickled egg carrying the vinegar tang, the beets tender and glossy beside it. They brightened a relish tray with their vivid color and packed a bold, tangy punch that cut through richer foods. They cost almost nothing, built from cheap beets and eggs and pantry vinegar, and they kept for a good while in the icebox. The days of waiting were the only real patience required, since the eggs needed time to color and take on the flavor. Given that time, they were beautiful and delicious. Did a jar of shocking pink pickled eggs ever sit in your refrigerator, brightening every plate they touched? Number 5. Ants on a log. Number 5 is the playful little snack that made eating vegetables feel like a game. 7. Corn fritters. Number 7 is the crispy fried corn cake that turned a little corn into a whole plate of pleasure. You stirred corn kernels into a simple batter of flour, egg, milk, and a little sugar, dropped spoonfuls into hot oil, and fried them until they puffed golden and crisp, then served them hot with a drizzle of maple syrup or a dusting of powdered sugar, or plain and savory alongside supper. Sweet or savory, they came out crackling and golden. This was old-fashioned country cooking, a way to stretch corn, fresh or canned, into a hot, satisfying dish that could sit anywhere on the menu from breakfast to supper. Frying corn into fritters turned a humble vegetable into a treat, crispy outside and tender and sweet within. The flavor was sweet and savory at once, the corn bursting inside a crisp, golden crust, wonderful drizzled with syrup for breakfast or served plain beside fried chicken. They cost almost nothing, built from corn and pantry staples, yet they made a generous plate that fed a family. They came out of the oil hot and crackling, and people ate them as fast as the cook could fry them. The only work was the frying itself, the hot oil and the standing at the stove dropping and turning each fritter. But that first hot, crispy, corn-sweet bite made every minute worth it. Did corn fritters ever come off your family's stove faster than you could eat them? Hot and golden and dripping with syrup. Number 6. Zucchini bread. Number 6 is the moist, spiced quick bread that hid a whole vegetable in a sweet loaf. You grated fresh zucchini and folded it into a batter of flour, sugar, oil, eggs, cinnamon, and vanilla, often with chopped walnuts. Then baked it into a moist, tender loaf that gave no hint of the vegetable inside except its remarkable moisture. Children ate it happily, never suspecting they were eating their zucchini. This bread became a signature of the decade, born of the same overflowing gardens and the same back-to-scratch spirit that defined the era's home baking. When the zucchini plants produced more than any family could eat, grating it into sweet bread was the clever answer, and the recipe passed from neighbor to neighbor all summer. The flavor was warm and sweet and spiced, the cinnamon and vanilla singing, while the zucchini kept the crumb wonderfully moist and tender. It made a lovely gift and a welcome snack, good plain or spread with butter or cream cheese. It cost almost nothing, since the zucchini was often free from the garden, yet it made a generous loaf or two. It froze well, which let a cook bake in bulk during the summer glut and enjoy it for months. There was little to fault, though a heavy hand with the oil could make it greasy. Baked right, it was moist, spiced, and comforting. Did your mother ever slip grated zucchini into a sweet bread and never tell the children what was really in it? Number: you cut celery into short sticks, filled the grooves with peanut butter, and pressed a line of raisins along the top. And there you had it, a log crawling with ants. Simple, wholesome, and fun. It was the after-school snack a mother could make in a minute, and a child could help assemble. The snack was built for children, a clever way to get a little vegetable, a little protein, and a little sweetness into a small person who might otherwise turn up their nose. The whimsy of the name did half the work, turning a plain stalk of celery into something a child was delighted to eat. The pleasure was in the mix, the cool crunch of the celery, the rich stick of the peanut butter, and the chewy sweetness of the raisins all in one bite. It cost almost nothing, built from 3 everyday staples, and it came together in moments with no cooking at all. It filled after-school plates and lunchboxes and party tables, a healthy treat disguised as a game. Making them was half the fun, a small kitchen project a child could do with clean hands and a little help. There was nothing to fault in something so simple and cheerful. It was a snack that made a child smile before the first bite. Did you ever make ants on a log after school, lining up the raisins just so before you ate them? Number 4, rice pilaf. Number 4 is the fluffy, savory rice that felt a step above plain white rice at supper. You toasted rice, and often a handful of broken vermicelli, in butter until golden, then simmered it in seasoned broth with onion until every grain turned tender, and separate and drank up the savory liquid. The toasting gave it a nutty depth, and the broth made it far more flavorful than rice boiled in plain water. Boxed versions made this a weeknight staple, but the homemade pilaf carried real flavor and a little sense of the exotic to the American table. Serving pilaf instead of plain rice felt like a small step toward something worldly, a savory side that dressed up an ordinary meal. The flavor was rich and savory, the toasted grains nutty and separate, the broth and onion giving it a depth that plain rice never had. It paired with nearly anything, from roast chicken to kebabs to a simple weeknight supper, always adding a savory, fragrant note. It cost little, built from rice and broth and a little butter, yet it tasted like more effort than it took. It came together in one pot with little fuss, a reliable side for a busy cook. The toasting was the whole secret, the step that separated a fragrant pilaf from a pot of plain rice. Toasted and simmered with care, it was fluffy and flavorful. Did rice pilaf ever make a plain weeknight dinner feel just a little more special at your table? Number 3, sweet potato casserole with marshmallows. Number 3 is the sweet, marshmallow-crowned casserole that closed out every holiday feast. You mashed baked sweet potatoes with butter, brown sugar, egg, and warm spices. Spread that into a dish, then covered the whole top with marshmallows and baked it until they puffed and turned golden and toasty. When it came to the table, the marshmallows were browned and gooey over the sweet, spiced potato beneath, and it was hard to tell whether it was a side dish or a dessert. This was a fixture of the Thanksgiving and Christmas table, the dish the children waited for, the one that made a holiday plate feel complete. Topping sweet potatoes with marshmallows turned an ordinary root into something festive and indulgent, a treat that appeared only on the biggest days of the year. The flavor was rich and sweet and warmly spiced. The smooth, buttery potato beneath the toasted, melting marshmallow, comforting and celebratory at once. It fed a big table from one pan and stood proudly beside the turkey and the dressing. It could be assembled ahead and topped with marshmallows just before baking, a real help on a busy holiday. Every family had its version, some with a pecan streusel, some with marshmallows edge to edge, and everyone was loyal to their own. The one gentle argument was always whether it belonged with dinner or with dessert. Either way, it meant the holiday had truly arrived. Do you remember watching those marshmallows brown in the oven and knowing the whole family was finally about to sit down together? Number 2, deviled eggs. Number 2 is the humble deviled egg, the plate that emptied first at every single gathering. You boiled eggs, halved them and popped out the yolks, then mashed those yolks with mayonnaise, mustard, a little vinegar or sweet pickle relish, salt and pepper, piped or spooned the creamy filling back into the whites, and dusted the tops with a sprinkle of paprika, arranged on a special plate with little wells made just for them. They were the first thing gone at any table. It was the universal appetizer, the dish that crossed every region and every family, appearing at holidays, picnics, funerals, and Sunday dinners without fail. Almost every family owned a dedicated deviled egg plate, a dish that came out so often it earned its own permanent spot in the cupboard. The flavor was rich and tangy and satisfying, the creamy, seasoned yolk filling against the cool, firm white, a perfect single bite that people could not stop eating. They cost almost nothing, built from eggs and a few pantry staples, yet they were treasured at every gathering. Everyone had their own touch, a little more mustard, a spoonful of relish, a secret dash of something, and folks were proud of their particular version. Making them took patient care, boiling and peeling and filling each half by hand. But that first creamy, tangy bite explained why the plate was always empty before the meal even began. Did your family have a special deviled egg plate that only came out when it was time to gather everyone together? Number 1. Ambrosia. And here at number 1 is ambrosia, the sweet, snowy fruit salad that closed out the holiday and gathered the whole family around the table. You folded together mandarin oranges, crushed pineapple, shredded coconut, and mini marshmallows, bound it all in whipped cream or sour cream, and often added maraschino cherries, chopped pecans, or miniature marshmallows until the whole thing was cool and creamy and sweet. You chilled it in the good crystal bowl, the one that only came out on the biggest days, and set it in the middle of the table for everyone to share. The name means the food of the gods, and to a child at a holiday table it truly felt that way. This was the heart of Southern and Midwestern holiday tradition, a dish so beloved it earned that heavenly name, passed down through the generations, and made the same way every year. It was the salad that was really a dessert, the sweet, cool finish that everyone reached for. After the ham and the dressing were done, the flavor was pure comfort and celebration. The sweet fruit and coconut and marshmallow folded into cool cream, light and sweet and festive in every spoonful. It cost little, built from cans of fruit and a bag of coconut, yet served in that crystal bowl, it felt like the crown of the whole meal. It could be made the day before, waiting cold in the icebox for the family to gather. More than any single ingredient, ambrosia meant the people you loved were all in one room, passing the bowl and telling the same old stories. That is why we want it back, and why we always will. Which of these dishes just brought your own family's table rushing back to you? That is the whole countdown. 100 forgotten side dishes and homemade snacks that once filled the tables you grew up around. Somewhere in this list was a bowl your mother made, a snack you carried to school, or a casserole that meant the whole family was finally home. I would love to hear which one you remember most. Tell me in the comments about the dish your family made, the person who made it, and the table it belonged to, so we can pass these memories on together. If this walk back through the old recipes warmed your heart, give it a like and subscribe so you never miss the next one. And if there is a forgotten